This is your eye test. Our lawyers make me do this every time I present. You don't have to memorize it, but you have to just say that I showed it if someone asks you. Okay, we'll skip that. My name is James Locke. Very happy to be here this morning with Chase. My colleagues in the room, Jenna Cadillo and Grace Castle, are over here to the left, to my left, to your right. They are your local, on-the-ground representatives from the bank, and happy to engage with questions and follow-ups as necessary. And I'm also happy to do that as well. So this morning we're going to talk about e-payables, the advances in using procurement cards and new technology to streamline payables operations, create efficiencies, and generate revenue for organizations that use them. A little bit about myself. I work with all of our government and higher education clients around the U.S. as a payables industry specialist, so I focus on specifically how government organizations, states, cities, counties, towns, school districts, etc., water utilities, things like that, use banking services. What are the trends they're seeing? What are the challenges and how they overcome those challenges? And I share those experiences with all of our clients across the United States. I also spend a fair bit of time speaking to groups such as yourself on these and other topics. So happy to be here this morning and share that with you. Just wanted to say that whatever I share today is going to be general industry information. I'm not making a product or sales pitch on behalf of Chase. This is to contribute back to the industry as a thought leader, as providing education, happy to answer questions. So this is all going to be generic. I will talk about the industry as a whole, that these solutions are available from a number of providers. If you have specific questions about how we would do a certain solution, happy to engage with that with you after the presentation. Also, just wanted to let you know that whatever I say are my opinions. I'm not making a statement or a position on behalf of JP Morgan or Chase. Again, I'm sharing my experiences and my understandings, not saying a statement on behalf of the bank. So get those things out of the way. Now we can move on. So today, we have a couple of topics on the screen. I guess there's not a pointer on here. Anyway, so the first thing we're going to do is talk about sort of this is the other one. Okay, this is the, okay, let's see here. Yes, this is not the slides for this morning. Grace, do you have, can you, the gentleman in the back, do you have email access? I'm sorry, excuse me.
Yes.
Because this slide won't work for this morning. Can we send you the file real quick? Okay. While we're taking care of that technical difficulty, and I apologize, we had a couple of meetings today and some files got confused to which ones were sent over. We're going to talk about how payments are changing. First of all, how many of you still write checks for your personal activities? A few. How many of you still carry cash? Yeah, personally, not in your work, but just personally. We're going to start there. Okay. I don't think half of you raised your hand, so that's consistent with what I see across the U.S. Most people nowadays are using payment cards. How many of you have a mobile wallet where you can make a payment using your phone? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. Some of you are on the leading edge of the payment transformation in the U.S. So what you'll find is a lot of things are happening. How many of you have heard of something called Bitcoin? Bitcoin. That is the bleeding edge, not a commonly used capability in the United States or anywhere that it's not mainstream. So we're going to talk about all the transformation of payments, and the content that's going to be on the screen in a few minutes. We'll talk about sort of what is happening. We're going to go through a Federal Reserve study about the changes in payment types, checks, cash, card payments, which would be a procurement card, a credit card, things like that. And what is causing this, and what are the benefits? So I'm going to do this from memory. I've done this presentation a couple of times, so we're going to start off with what the first few slides will cover. So what we're going to see in a few minutes is the rate from about 2006 to about 2013, I think. The data from the various studies of the Federal Reserve and NACHA and various other payment industry research groups lags about a year to 18 months. So the studies are not 2014 because we haven't finished this year, but they're the most current data that's available. So you're going to see in one of the first graphics, the rise in use of electronic payment methods. That's ACH, that's all our direct deposit, right? Everybody pretty much gets paid electronically these days, right? Maybe if you do get a check, but most people get a deposit. for their payroll twice a month, once a month, whatever frequency you have. That really is probably the leading component of the electronic payment methods for routine, regular payments. Then we see, talking about organizations such as school districts and government entities, we see the use of a card. So as a person, as a consumer, we have a credit card or a debit card, right? And we use a variety of payments. We may pay airline tickets, we may pay some utilities with a card payment because it's convenient. We may also have recurring debits for, say, your water bill, your health club, your gym. A lot of gyms nowadays will automatically debit a credit card, debit card, or your checking account. They don't really care which. One is cheaper than the other for them, but they work that into their pricing, they cover their expenses that way. But as consumers, it's easier for us to pay with a card, right? So as organizations that transact with consumers, take money, collect revenue, they have to have the ability to accept those card payments. Then they say, okay, I'll accept card payments, but what about paying my organization's payables with a more efficient method? Well, the most efficient method, and now there are two schools of thought. Again, I'm going to talk about industry standard practices, and there's never one right answer. There's never one common belief. There's competing theories and thoughts. So there's two schools of thoughts about the most efficient method of payment for an organization like the government or a school district to disperse money, not payroll. Payroll we leave on the side because that's virtually direct deposit ACH. We're going to talk about vendor payments, one-time payments, refunds, things like that. What you'll see is that we are finding in the industry that the use of a procurement card or something called an e-payable, which is sort of the advancing new area of expansion for procurement payments, are becoming more common. How many in here, without saying where you're from, just raise your hands, how many are using procurement cards to pay invoices? 2, 3, maybe a quarter, maybe less than a quarter in the room. That's been around for, let's say, 10, 15, 20 years, roughly. Those capabilities allow a couple of things to happen. A lot of times, they're for purchases that have a dollar amount less than $2,500, less than $2,000. So we're talking small invoices. Things that you may have to do a purchase order for in the past to procure an inventory, O&M, operations and maintenance, cleaning supplies, repair to the buildings and things like that. You may have had to do purchase orders, submit a request, and get an invoice and pay. While using a procurement card, you can take out those first few steps and authorize users in your organization to just go and pay the vendor, pick up the materials they need that day, say from Home Depot to repair the roof or to get more copy paper from Staples or whoever you might use, whatever vendor. Using a procurement card, you can take out the purchase order in the process. You can streamline the payment, so payment is made to the vendor faster, and you have less paperwork, and it can be automated because you can have reconciliation done with a file transfer from the banks. So what this does is it creates more efficiency in the in the payables department. You still will have your invoices for your larger contracted payments, your things over $4,000 or $5,000. Let me know when it's there, if you could, sir. Is it on there?
No, not yet.
Okay, let me know when it gets here, please. So you'll have, so your large purchases will be on your, maybe paid by check, paid by ACH once the invoices come in and it's been three-party match. The invoices come in, the goods have been received, and you've had some reconciliation, and you can approve the payment to be made. So what we've seen is, not only can we eliminate the purchase order, we've also seen that in purchase card programs, how many of you know what the term rebate means? Those of you that have a P-card program know what rebate means. For those that don't, that means you can create a revenue stream. So the banks that issue these card programs will share the revenue from the interchange. So interchange is when a person pays a bill or pays for some goods or services with a plastic purchase card. The merchant that accepts that payment has to pay a percentage back to the provider of that card for the ability to get paid fast, usually the next day. And it's virtually guaranteed. There's a couple of exceptions for fraud, and so generally it's going to be an accepted guaranteed payment. So in order to do that, they've paid a fee, percentage based, I'm going to say roughly 2.2%. That varies because if it's a government environment and a certain kind of merchants, it may be at 1.6%. If it's a very large dollar amount, it may be 80 basis points, which is 80% of 1%, for those of you that are familiar with that term. So they pay this percentage, this discount or interchange rate to accept the card payment, because that provides that merchant with a very efficient way to collect their revenue. And in doing that, that revenue comes through the banking process to the issuer of the card program, to the bank that provides your procurement card program in the form of revenue, because it pays to operate the program. Well, what happened a number of years ago is the banking industry started sharing a portion of that 2.2% with the card program owner. So say the school district in the case of those folks in this room. So that creates a revenue stream that probably far surpasses the economic savings of getting the paper out of the procurement card process. Before going any further, have I lost anybody? Does that make sense? For those of you that don't have a P-card program, does that make sense? You've maybe never heard this before. So, back to the thing where I said there's two schools of thought. One says pay with electronics ACH direct deposit because it's pennies on the dollar on average of what it costs to make that electronic payment. Well, that's very efficient, right? Pennies on a dollar to make a payment, pretty good. But then the other school of thought is, well, if I put up a purchase card, it doesn't cost me a penny, and I'm going to get a revenue stream back from using this card. So two schools of thought. Well, most people, most businesses that will conduct business will take a direct deposit because they have a banking capability with their bank to take incoming ACH payments, right? And they can do it pretty economically. Again, it's the most economic form of electronic payment. They may already be taking credit cards and debit cards because that's how their business is set up. They have lots of people that use cards to make payments. But when they're businesses, so they would consider you a non-consumer organization buying from them, I want to pay this invoice with a purchase card. They're going to say, well, that's going to cost me 2.2%. Some organizations, that is cheaper than you paying them by a check or with an ACH because they have to do reconciliation, maybe manually, and enter that data into their system, with all these manual processes. But if you pay them with a purchase card, and they're more automated, they don't have to have the accounting and back office processes in place. So they can say that 2.2% cost for you to pay that invoice with a card to me, I'm going to get paid the next day versus say 10 to 15 days and the flow the cost of that from the financial perspective. But they're going to say, that's cheaper than if you were writing a check and I got to wait for the check to get in the mail. What happens if it gets lost? When the check comes in, okay, this check goes to this invoice, update my records and all the banking processes. Then I got to deposit the check to get the money technically to my account, right? So they may say 2.2% is cheaper than the other traditional banking process of check payments. And there's still a lot of organizations that predominantly take checks and predominantly pay with check. So they could say, it's cheaper for me as a merchant to do business with you, school district, if you use your purchase card. But that's not everybody. I don't even want to say that's the majority. It just depends on where you're located, the kind of merchant you're doing business with, their back office banking operations, and what makes more sense for them. So that's why there's two schools of thought. The pros and cons of the ACH. The pro is the payment is very, very inexpensive to initiate as a school district to pay a vendor. It's very fast. It goes, it's a next day batch process. It's on the banking side of the merchant, it's relatively easy for them to accept. And if they have a sophisticated enough accounting system, they can import the data and do some reconciliation. If you pay by a purchase card, it's paid next day to the merchant, and they get their deposit next day, but they pay a cost. So there's pros and cons. The point of all this discussion is to say there's a variety of choices, but all these choices are driving paper check payments dispersed by school districts and governments and everybody else, and deposited by the vendors that are doing business with you. We're driving the payment out of the paper checks out of the payments market as a type of payment method. So there's another slide that talks about the Federal Reserve does a payment study every so many years to look at the types of payments that are being used. Checks, ACH payments, which is their direct deposit, commercial credit cards, procurement cards, prepaid cards, things like that. Was there a question there? Okay. Yes, sir.
What do you see as a typical rebate back to the districts as a percentage of the 2.2 or whatever?
That is a question I really can't say typical because they vary dramatically. Let me tell you what makes them vary. I can't give you a number because there's a ton of things that make a factor into that. But first of all, the variables. What would drive that amount? the amount of money you're putting on a P card. Is it a new program or a startup, an existing program that's already been, has ramped to a certain volume? Or is it a startup that you have to work to get your merchants to accept, your vendors to accept? The type of reporting that you want, how automated your back-end system is to take a reporting file, how many cards you're going to use. Those are some of the factors that make a difference. How you're going to handle program management. Are you going to have someone in your organization that's going to be the go-between between your folks and the bank? Or does the bank have to provide a lot of banking, a lot of customer service? And I'm speaking again, generally, industry information, not our preference anyway, just generally speaking. There's a wide variety. I would say on the larger end, it's a bigger portion of that number of that 2. And again, the 2.2, who in this room handles the collections? I know this is a payables discussion, but I want to ask a collections question. So does anybody in the room deal with collecting the revenue for your school district? Anybody? Okay. Well, if you were one of those folks and you had a merchant, had the ability to take credit card payments, say for paying fees or ancillary things that you might collect, and you've got to accept credit cards and debit cards, and you saw the merchant statement, you'd see about 35 different line items, because there's a lot of different interchange rates based on the kind of card that's accepted. So if a consumer debit card is accepted, that will clear it, say, and now after Dodd-Frank, it'll clear, 50 cents, not a percentage, but a flat amount, 50 cents or 25 cents, depends. If it's not from a major bank but a small bank, if it's a major bank, it's a different rate, because Dodd-Frank broke up the 8 largest banks versus the rest of the small ones from an interchange cost for debit. If it's someone that's using a rewards card, like someone's paying you and they're using their fill-in-the-blank airline rewards card, there's lots of them out there. I'm sure we all have different colors in our wallet. That card probably will have a higher interchange rate because that bank has to pay for the points we give that card holder. Versus if you had, say, another card by a bank that had very few bells and whistles, it might clear at a lower interchange rate. So there's a number of different rates. There's also something called large ticket that's 80 basis points, not 220. 220 basis points is 2.2%. So you have to know what the mix is of your spend by cards that are being paid, and that translates back into how much interchange revenue the bank has on your card. So that's why I can't give you a number. But if you're spending a lot of money on the cards, and you don't have much of the large tickets like invoices over $9,000 or $10,000, and the merchants are large ticket interchange merchants, which will lower your interchange rate, you would have a larger portion of that to be rebated. If you say have 4 or 5 million in spend, and you only have a few cards, your rate's going to be a little lower. So there's a ton of variables. Happy to discuss with you offline. What I would suggest is talk to your peers in the room that have those programs and just ask the question. They might be willing to share. We're happy to talk about it offline as well, but that's to sort of help, as much as I can answer you in this kind of a forum. Does that make sense? Okay. They're working on the presentation. So we've got sort of the competing theories on payment types, right? Any questions on those? And that was a great question. I'm glad you asked it. So now let's talk about what's the new stuff, because I think what you want to hear is what's happening in the industry to make it easier. What's the bank industry doing to create greater technologies around procurement card programs? Who's familiar with the term e-payables? Okay. Do you have any payables program? Okay, so you're the experts in the room. I promise not to ask any questions, but I know to look at you, you'll get what I'm saying, because you're doing this stuff. So e-payables is a relatively new expansion of an existing purchase card capability. So you're familiar with, I'm going to use the terminology of railroad tracks. So the ATM networks have a set of railroad tracks to the banks, and they're interoperable based on whatever bank issues your card, as long as it has that little bug or logo, the Visa, MasterCard, Discover, Cirrus, Maestro, all those different bugs, Appen, which is the Armed Forces Network, and I forget the few others. There's about 9 or 10. So as long as you have a card that has one of those symbols on it, that ATM, no matter whose machine it is, will talk to your bank and give you that money, right? That's one set of railroad tracks. Then you have the point of sale for credit and debit, for credit cards, right? That's another set of railroad tracks. So those all are standards. All the banks that take these cards and issue these cards, they all comply with the standards. Every 6 months, Visa, MasterCard update their parameters, so there may be some tweaks and changes. There'll be a big one coming. If I can give you a trivia prize, I would, but I'm asking you a question, and the person that wins it will just get a flap or something. What happens in the US, October 1st of 2015, related to cards and liability for fraud? Anybody know? Anybody been out of the country traveling with their credit card in the past couple of years? Have you had any trouble using your card without a chip on it?
Yes.
Okay. On October 1st of 2015, the US will finally become EMV compliant, meaning chip and PIN, meaning that your physical card acceptance devices will not use the mag stripe on the back, which we're all familiar with. They will use a chip. And the little chip, and I have one in my wallet, what it does is it makes the card much, much safer. Because instead of this mag stripe back here, this mag stripe, your account number, your expiration date, your card verification value, is all in the clear. It means if you had the little reader read it, you could know what my card number was by just swiping it. And those machines are a dime a dozen, and every crook has it. That's how they counterfeit our cards. When you get a phone call, hey, were you in El Paso yesterday or this morning buying a toaster or buying a computer? No, I was here in Houston. Obviously that wasn't my card, but someone counterfeited your mag stripe and bought something. Well, the industry, many years ago, in Europe and Asia and other places, developed this chip technology so that initially they didn't have the ability for computers to talk real time with telephone lines, because if you were in, say, Europe 15 years ago, there weren't a lot of telephone lines. That's not a common thing. They had these devices. They bring your table, they put the card in, and they pay. And the terminal and the card would talk to each other, and they conduct the transaction. Well, that comes to the US October 1st of next year. And it will cut down on counterfeit fraud because this chip has a computer in it. The computing power of this chip is equals the average laptop that you have on your desk today. And this chip can talk real time to the terminal, which has an equal chip in it, that they're compatible. And they will say, are you okay to have this transaction, or can you do this transaction in this part of the world? How much dollar amount do you have to spend before I have to go talk to your bank and get permission, or can you just do this ourselves? Those sort of things. This will cut down on counterfeit card fraud. It also lets your bank dynamically update your card information every time you swipe, every time you put it in the machine. So these things are happening in the industry. What is also happening is the ability to get away from a piece of plastic card for procurement purchases.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Why was US so slow?
The reason is we've had terminals in place and the telephony, the connectivity, since Visa and MasterCard were really born 40 50 years ago. So we always had online authorization. The other parts of the world never had an online authorization where when you put it in the machine or swipe it, it connects back and talks to your bank real time in a matter of 3 or 4 seconds. Most of the world hasn't had that because they haven't had the telephone line and the internet infrastructure to have that real-time connection. And if they did, it was expensive for a restaurant to have a permanent phone line for the purpose of getting bank authorizations on credit cards. So they had to develop a sort of offline, self-contained ability to have that authorization process. So the US has invested for the past 40 years in point of sale at every checkout lane in a grocery store, and Target, and all these stores, and gas pumps. Well, merchants have invested lots of money. Why would they want to switch? So for many years, they resisted, because that's a huge investment the merchants have to make. And if you've ever owned a small business or one that does, profit margins are pretty thin. Maybe a couple percentage points for most small businesses, and large businesses too have those challenges. So they said, why am I going to invest in this technology when it works today? And counterfeit fraud is minuscule in comparison. But as Europe and Asia and Africa and other parts of the world have clamped down on it, where does water go when you have a leak in your roof? The easiest point of getting in your house. It could be a tiny pinhole leak, dripping for 10 years will ruin your roof, right? Or that part of the house. Criminals go where there's a path of least resistance. And right now the US is wide open. Okay? So merchants, banks, and I'm speaking, this is James's opinion from reading the newspaper and just talking to people. I'm not saying what the banks, but this is me talking, have finally realized that counterfeit fraud is growing in comparison to what it used to be, and we need to put in place better controls to prevent counterfeit fraud. The other thing is, people that go overseas are lucrative credit card users because they're spending, they're creating interchange revenue. I need to make it easier so you'll keep using my card that has a chip on it versus the guy down the street who gives you a chip card. Those are both the primary reasons why the U.S. is finally going to adopt it October 1st of 2015. Does that make sense?
Well, they were kind of forced to.
No. Now let me be really clear. They don't have to do this. If you're a merchant, you cannot do this. The issue is any fraudulent counterfeit transaction after that date next year happens, you as a merchant eat all the losses, no matter if it's your fault or not. So how do we change people's behavior? We incent them. So as a merchant, as a business owner, losses are a huge incentive to avoid, i.e. it's not a mandate, it's just a change in the rules. You don't have to comply, you'll be fine, you won't get in trouble, but all those losses will go back to you as the merchant. Likewise, if your issuer does not provide you with a card that can do this, and the merchant has the ability to take a chip card and you give them a mag stripe and there's counterfeit fraud, the issuer eats it. Issuers have a little bit bigger pockets, but their consumers will go where they can get the chip card because it's easier. It's more convenient. So that's sort of how that'll happen, but it's not mandated, just to be real clear. And a chip card is not encrypted, but it has controls in place to help reduce counterfeit fraud. Tokenization and into an encryption on the merchant side will handle the encryption piece. But together, like layers around the fortress, combined help increase security. Does that make sense?
I guess what I'm saying, it seems that like wherever you go in Europe,
Yep.
it's here rare.
Right.
It seems like it's a money, somehow, you really can't explain anything in life that has to do with money.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm kind of thinking more is, there was some money issue or some.
It was an investment in technology infrastructure. So new hardware at the grocery store, which by the way, is Kroger here? You have Kroger in Texas, okay. You've already done this. I know the stores where I live in Atlanta have. The machine, it's got the color screen that you do your little checkout. Look on the bottom of it, you'll see a little thing with a funny looking symbol, and below that's a little slot. Those grocery stores can take the card, physically take it. They may have not put the software update in the device because they haven't trained their clerks how to do things differently. I believe Target's rolling them out. Walmart's had them, they just don't turn them on. So the infrastructure is changing. And every couple of 3 to 5 years, they replace terminals. All the manufacturers that make those little POS machines are, when they roll out a new device, they're coming with it built in. So those things are helping merchants absorb the cost change, but it's the liability shift that's driving it. It all goes back to their expense. Yes, sir.
Can you tell us again what this chip is?
EMV, Europay, MasterCard, Visa, which also has Amex, but they didn't change the name. It's owned by those 4 entities. It's a global standard for chip and pins in the entire world. If you want to know more about it, go to emvco.com or where, I forget which. EMVco is the global standards organization. They just set the standards, they don't sell anything. They have all that information about it. They have a map that shows rollout across the US. So my only, here I'm going to shift back to SUA in a second, is to say if you have people that travel and you have purchased travel cards, ask your provider when you're going to get your chip cards. So just ask that question to be a good dialogue for your organization. I know you guys don't do that, but your private colleagues will do. So, continue the discussion of what's been changing using purchase cards virtually. So ePayables is a virtual purchase card program. It allows you, one, to capture more of your spend. And when I say spend, I mean the amount of cost of your vendor payables that you have to remit over a year. So if you have, let's just, for the factor of discussion, $1 million, and I know you have a lot more than that. And how many in vendor payments? You may today have, yes, thank you.
Sorry.
You're a miracle worker.
JP Morgan locks up computers so tight, it's amazing. So.
Okay, so can you press that listen now? Thank you. Oh, okay, all right. Okay, perfect. Oh, thank you. I apologize, but we're back in tracking. What I just told you is not lost, because it's in here somewhere. Okay. So this was the first graph I said about the amount of how checks were going down, ACH is going up, and cards in the yellow on the top. I told you some of the benefits. I'm going to go through the first few slides and get to where we were. Up here, and this has been on, we need to make sure that the correct presentation is put on the website so you can download these, because you may have the wrong one. I don't remember which one was downloaded, but this is the graphic, and it's hard to read from a distance, but this is the Federal Reserve study. Up here on the right is the CAGR, the combined average growth rate, or annual growth rate. And you'll see the top one is checks paid, From 2003 to 2012, it's a negative 7.6%. So check volume from 2003 to 2012 went down as a type of payment used at the Fed study, 7.6%. That's 9 years, 7.6 decline. 2009 to 2012, a 3-year period, it went down 9.2%. So we've seen a steep decline over time. It's gotten steeper since 2009 versus the 6 years, 9 years before that. You'll see, that's the white component of the bar on the top, and the dark blue is ACH. It's had a growth rate. It grew the first 9 years measured 10.9%. It grew 5.15% in the last 3 years, 2009, 2012. The next one is credit card, the lighter blue. Then the lightest blue, below that, the 47. That is debit cards. And by far, debit cards are the most common card used because consumers prefer those over credit because they don't want to put everything on a credit card and they want to manage their budget. And you just put your normal, just like your gas and things like that, your grocery store on a debit card. And the little tiny roll, which you can't even see, which is prepaid, that had a growth of 30% from 03 to 12 and 15% from 09 to 12. So you'll see that the rate of growth in 2012 is about half of the previous 9 years. So the point of this slide is to say payment types are changing, checks are dramatically decreasing, and they're going to cards. And we have about 30 minutes or less left. So e-payables looks like a purchase card. It's a purchase card, and it rides the purchase card rails. It is not a piece of plastic. So on this upper right-hand side, we have the blue and the red. The blue is traditional purchase card spend in North America by all organizations, and that blue bar is $183 billion in 2014. The red component on top is $73 billion. The red are programs like these ladies have a PE payables program. So you see the percent increase of the red every year since 2007 when these cards first started really being in the market and being introduced. There were some before, but there wasn't enough to really measure. Organizations that are using electronic accounts payable or e-payables, we call them single-use accounts for several different names. The percentage of vendor payments made between P-card and e-payables, the e-payables has grown every year. It's not a dramatic growth amount difference. It's 59 million to 66 to 73 from 12, 13, and 14, but it is growing. So that's what we're seeing in this industry, and it's because you can increase your rebate by putting more spend on a purchase card. You can get a higher invoice amount because the biggest factor that people don't pay bigger invoices with a piece of plastic is they have to give that person a higher credit limit. And no one wants to authorize an employee to have a $20,000 credit limit. There's a risk of concern of fraud and misuse. But if it's a virtual card that the person never touches, and the computer gives the vendor the number to use, the control factors are dramatically higher, and the risk is dramatically lower, so you can feel comfortable as an organization from a risk perspective of putting more invoice spend on an e-payables card. Okay, so you get rid of some of that paper processing for those invoices that you don't have to do anymore, and you increase the spend on the program. You combine the spend on e-payables with the spend on your purchase card for a total, and you have a higher rebate in real dollars and probably the basis points the bank will offer, and if it's a competition environment. So we're seeing that's the biggest and the most dramatic industry change in the payables front is moving to e-payables. If you already have a purchase card program, if you don't have either, you start with a P card. You can just start with SUA. We have a few clients, I know Grace and Joanne and I have a number of clients that have just started with SUA programs, or e-payables, excuse me, the generic industry term. The other change we're seeing is those organizations that still write checks, and every vendor won't take a card, and every vendor doesn't want to take an ACH payment. So if they're only a one-time payment, why do you want to get their bank account information and have to manage that on your system? Because one, that's information you have to protect, because you have someone's account you could theoretically debit, or someone that gets the number in your organization could get debit inappropriately. So there's still some check payments out there. The other big change we're seeing is organizations saying, it's costing me a fortune to print checks in-house. I gotta find a cheaper alternative until I can get rid of them, eventually get rid of it entirely. So a lot of banks are now offering check printing services where their clients will email them a file of the dollar amount, the date, the name of the payee, other data they need, and tell them, print and mail these checks out on my behalf. So that allows for organizations that do that to have a completely green disbursement function. So no paper payment leaves the office. They all go out electronically to the bank, and the bank says, these are the payments for ACH, those have been there, they keep going. These are the payments on P-card. These are the payments for your e-payables program. And only I'm gonna add a fourth electronic type, checks. And the bank gets that file, splits them off to the check processor, prints the check, stuffs them in an envelope, and mail them. The average cost, and this is I think an Aberdeen Group study, which is an industry researching group like AI and a couple of others, Treasury Strategies, Greenwich, and so forth. The average cost they estimate to make a paper check payment for an organization that does it in-house, means they print the checks, they stuff them, mail them, and all that stuff, is $2.43 a check. Now, look down here. This bottom graph, and it's kind of blurry, I don't know if we can focus that or not any better, but the bottom graph, and this will be the thing you can download off your website, shows the cost of the average payables function, payables invoice by industry. And the one that's in this bar dash box around is government and not-for-profit. I mean, you guys would fall in that industry group. The average cost is $12.92 for those that are less than half of their invoices are electronic. And for those groups, companies that were surveyed, and businesses and governments that were surveyed that have 50% of their payments, payables, invoices are electronic, their average cost is $7.83. That's actually much higher than the other industries, but these, remember, these other ones are for-profit motivated organizations. This one is not. So for-profit companies do things a lot cheaper. They have a lot of different things they do. They may only say, we pay you this way or you don't get paid by us. You won't be a vendor for us. Governments, colleges, hospitals, nonprofits, they don't generally get that mandate. They say, we'll pay you what's the method you can take, and we want you as a business partner. We have different goals and objectives. That being said, we are finding that even these folks who print checks still say, it's costing me much more than $2.43. What can the banks do? And the bank industry can do that for about, I don't want to say half, but in some cases it can be less than half. Because remember, banks print a lot of stuff. They get probably a better postage rate than most government organizations do. Except the federal government, they get their postage. Well, that's conversation, it's free, that's another story. But most organizations have a higher bulk rate than, say, a large mailing organization like a bank that mails bank statements and credit card offers and who knows what else out every day. So sometimes the banks can offer you a lower postage rate. And if they're printing millions of checks, that's a cheaper per unit cost than, say, you're printing 1,000 checks at one time. So that's what that's the secondary change we're seeing in payables, is moving to completely electronify your disbursements and letting the banking industry, or some third party, it doesn't have to be a bank, there are other companies that print mail checks for clients all the time. We prefer to be a bank, that's just my personal opinion, for a lot less than what you can do in-house. And here's the thing to remember about this, and why I would say you want to think about it if you're not doing it. If you're doing it in-house today, why you want to think about perhaps changing, as your check volume decreases, because you put more people on a card program or on ACH, your per check cost for that check will go up. Because you still have the two printers probably, you still have the paper, you still have the postage, spread over fewer items. What does that do in math? It raises the per item. So those are the two changing factors that we're seeing there. Any questions on that? Okay. So now to dig a little deeper, and we're going to talk overall payables here. What are the three components of cost in the payables organization? Data entry, reconciliation, and payment. Again, using the same concept, greater than half of their payments are electronic versus half are paper. The folks in blue, they're the ones that are more manual in their payables departments. The folks in green have more automation going on. So data entry. How many of you receive your invoices electronically from your vendors? Anybody? Are you getting paper invoices you're keying into your system? Everybody's doing the paper entry key stuff? Okay. That's this first component. That's one of the most expensive because one, it takes time to enter all the data, and two, sometimes we make typos. And you gotta go back and fix them. So there's cost there. Then the reconciliation and PO part. How many of you are using some ERP like Workday, SAP, PeopleSoft, Oracle, Quali, in government, CGI's, Advantage, I think maybe. Any of those names ring a bell for ERPs, for your general ledger systems or accounting systems? What are some other names you're using? systems out? Anybody? Don't know? Who's using like an SAP or Oracle? Okay. Those technologies have payables components or modules. Are you using that? Do you know? Okay. So if you are, and you can get your vendors to send you your their invoices electronically, they can be fed automatically into their payables module, and they can do the reconciliation. So when the invoice comes in, they match it to a PO if it wasn't if it was a PO-based order, and then they say, okay, who approves this? Well, what department is it for? How much was it? How much was the invoice amount? Who has the approval authority? This is all the reconciliation because we don't want to pay until we've got it approved. Then we want to reconcile to make sure that it hasn't got paid. So that's all the cost processes in here. And then here's the payment piece. Now this is about 50 or 75 cents if you're really automated. One of the things that I do with our clients is I do studies on their cost of in-house check production, and we have a form that we fill out on all the different cost components, and we get an average cost per check. And I said the industry average from the Aberdeen Group study a couple of years ago was $2.43. That's for a non-payroll. We're talking an AP vendor payment. When I do it with actual customers in government and utilities and things like that, it's around $2. So $2.05. I've seen one for $1.99. I've seen some for almost $3. So the 243 is a pretty good benchmark to use if you wanted to figure out what your cost was. Just take 243 times the number of checks you issue in a year. That's your in-house cost. Probably within the ballpark of 80-90% accuracy, unless you have something unique about your organization that would be a factor to change the cost for it. So that is sort of where this piece is, and then this is the total on average if you're automated or highly automated or not. This is where the banking industry plays to help you as an organization reduce the cost to make that payment. So what we want to make sure we don't confuse is these are the other key parts of the payables operation, but we don't do these things. There are third parties that provide these capabilities, but we interface with the vast majority of those. We have about 9 different file formats that we support, and other banks do that as well. So this is an industry thing. This is where the banking industry helps you become more efficient in the payable transaction. Now, if you're going to use a card program, I said it earlier, those are revenue generating, right? So there isn't a cost to make that payment for paying the card. If you're using ACH, it's some pennies or maybe a dime or who knows. If you're using a check, we're talking dollars. So this is the conversation to have internally about your payables operation and the level of efficiency. Any questions with that? Okay. So we've been talking about card payments. So this is something we call the payables continuum. Again, this is industry-based. Lots of banks issue purchase card, travel cards. The ones on the right, declining balance, department card, ghost card, supplier card, are all variations of a purchase card program. Supplier cards where you issue a piece of plastic to a particular merchant and you give it to them, and they hold onto that card. And every invoice you want to pay to them, they charge to that 16-digit number that was assigned by yourself to that merchant. So that way you have all the invoices for Acme Plumbing on one card number. Declining balance card is where you bring controls to that and say, I'm going to manage that credit limit, the authorization to spend, up and down based on what invoices are outstanding with that supplier. And then department card is where you give, the maintenance department their own card to go buy whatever they need to do their job. They got to go to Home Depot, to Grainger, to wherever they've got to go to get their things to fix the AC or fix a doorknob or whatever. They get a department card. So that's this kind of card issued to a department of your organization. So like a supplier card, but just inside versus out of the vendor. On the far right, that's where we're talking about a payable single-use account. There is no piece of plastic associated. A card number is generated for every single invoice. So as you approve an invoice, you send a file to your bank that offers this program and says, I want to pay this merchant this dollar amount in this date range, and they give you a unique card number just for that invoice. And when that invoice happens, they tell the supplier, okay, this invoice has been approved to be paid, use this card number to get your payment. They enter that card number, they put it through their merchant system, it comes back through the bank you work with, comes back through your reporting system in a file, then the file that was sent out was matched with come back in, and in a perfect world, in programs, there's a variety of programs, in the market. Some do this and some don't. The one I work with does. We'll match it 100%, so your reconciliation is done. No back office reconciliation is required because the systems match. They knew what you were going to pay. That's what they paid. They match the numbers, the dollar amounts match, and you're done. So that's what I mean by an e-payables program. Any questions on that?
Where does wires figure in all this?
Good question. We don't talk about wires for a couple reasons. One, they haven't changed in 20, 30 years. Number two, they're very seldomly used. They're usually used for urgent payments, pay today. They have to be finality of funds. They cannot be revoked. There are very few organizations that require a wire payment. That's why they're not in here. They haven't changed. They're always going to be around. There's a good purpose for them. They're also expensive. We're talking 25, 30 bucks to issue a wire. So you don't use. I have most of my customers do 0.5% to 1% of wires of their total spend a year in terms of number of items. So we just don't talk about it because it's a very common app. Do you have a question about it? Maybe I could answer.
Well, if you wanted to push the vendor instead of doing a wire, what would you suggest that you go and take them into?
Well, if you're paying them by wire today, they have to almost mandate you to pay them that way because it's costing you probably $20, $30 to pay them. Do you know why they would want that, or is there something in your contract maybe that requires it? Are they a foreign vendor maybe? And they can't.
No.
Okay.
No, construction company?
That's probably a large dollar payment. Maybe it's a
Maybe availability fund.
yeah. Maybe it could be a funding issue. They want to make sure the money's there today and you can't take it back.
Yeah, I've just been told it's not really a wire, it's an ACH.
Okay, yes, all right, yeah. ACH is far more common. Theoretically, on average, that I see, 70 to 80% of customers' payments are ACH. That's direct deposit. That's the pennies or dime, 15 cents a transaction, depends on what your pricing is, and that's all variable based on volume by your provider. Less than 1% or significantly less than 1% is wires, and the rest of it's going to be on either checks or cards or some combination thereof. I see a lot of organizations that still writing a lot of checks. I have some customers that are writing almost all checks for non-payroll payments. They are desperately needing to become more efficient because that's costing them a lot of money per year. So that's sort of what this conversation is about, looking to become more efficient. Yes, sir?
One more question.
Sure.
Is it place checks and positive pay?
Yes.
Is the industry moving to where they're checking the vendor or the payee and the amount? Or
Mhm.
is that ever gonna happen?
Positive Pay started out with dollar amount, check number, date,
Right.
pretty much. A number of years ago, they added payee name. So on top of the dollar amount of the check, the date of the check, and the check number, they added who you wrote the check to. Because the crooks were using chemicals to write out the name of like Joe's Plumbing and put in, John Smith. So now banks have put in, add to your payment positive pay file who you wrote the check to, and if it doesn't match that person's name exactly, the check will come up as an exception, and you can return it or you can pay it based on whatever your rules are. That is, okay, again, James' opinion, never going away. Probably the banks you work with now require you to do it or indemnify them. And some banks won't even do business unless you'll do it. It is absolutely, without a doubt, next to debit filters, debit block on your checking accounts. You need to do it. If you're not doing it, we need to stop. Because you're opening yourself up to fraud. Crooks will find the person that has the account that doesn't have blocks or positive pay turned on, and they will take 5 cents a day. You're not going to catch 5 cents unless you're reconciling every single day. And then you're going to spend 4 hours looking for 50 cents. But 50 cents or 5 cents a day over 10 years, there's been a lot of stories in the news, that adds up. So positive pay is critical, as is debit block if you have an account that does both ACH and checks. So,
Jason, another
Yes,
thing,
ma'am.
along with the positive pay, some banks will take that positive pay file and actually you can outsource the check clearing function.
Yeah.
So all of that can be done, through your bank with one file.
exactly. Great question. Anybody else want to talk about positive pay when we're on the topic? Okay, then we have some volumes. This is some value of purchasing cards. I've been through some of this, but really the point of the purchase card, this study, I'm not sure if you can read the first bar in the yellow box. The average reduction in transaction costs for a vendor payment when you went from a purchase card to the traditional paper process and PO process went from $92.49 to $21.91. Now that is back from a study done in 2010, so this is a couple years old. but you will see the purchase card got out, all the paper, a lot of this, because a lot of your invoices are small dollars, which are ideally suited to a P card program. That's the back office AP shop overall operating cost that was able to reduce at on a per transaction basis. Big numbers that were reduced. This is another graphic that talks about types of companies and organizations that use P cards. We talk about Fortune 500, large market, middle market, and public sector on the far right. So it's just more data for you. If you're not familiar with the programs, this is good information. If you already have a program, these are things you're already seeing in your organization, some metrics. This graphic represents the cost and time, cycle time reduction for payables in a traditional paper process with a PO method versus a purchase card that doesn't involve a PO. Okay. When I talked earlier about rebate, that's usually the number one thing people think about with a P card program. The number two thing is a float. Who's familiar with the term float in banking sense? Probably most of you are. Okay. So today, you write a check, you get the invoice in day one, you process it, approve it, enter it in your system, and do all those things. You cut a check, let's say on day 20. That check goes in the mail, gets to the vendor by day 25, they deposit it, clears your account, let's say on day 30. That's a slow process, but that's average. So that money hits your account on day 30. You had 30 days to float on that invoice. If you paid that vendor on a purchase card, the vendor gets paid the next day. They're not waiting for that check to get mailed. As soon as you get approved the invoice, bless you, your vendor's going to get paid the next day on a P card if that's how you set your system up. But you're not going to pay the bank. So that vendor's payment amount that you paid that vendor has never left your account because you put on the bank's credit card that the bank issued to you, the purchase card. So this describes to you on average the float savings that an organization that remits payments on P cards can realize. The average float is 29 days, which is much greater than you'd have in a traditional environment that's not using a P card. Maximum float is 44 days. For the sake of the mathematical discussion, we divide the 30-day billing cycle because every card program has a 30-day invoice. So you start on day one, you buy all through the month, all the card payments all through the month. A 30-day invoice cuts off, the bank gives you a 14-day grace period to remit the payment for the invoice. So 30 and 14 is 44. But everybody doesn't buy the first of the month and pay all their invoices on day one and not pay till day 44. You do it all through the month. So you basically average the 30 into 15, plus the 14 is 29. So your float, so you don't pay, you paid all these invoices this entire month. Some paid on the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, some paid on the 29th for all your invoices. And those vendors got paid the next day or so. But you had at least 14 extra days for that money left your account. So your organization has the liquidity and float benefit. Now, I know interest rates are nothing, even though the Fed said 2 days ago, if things keep looking up, they might go up, but that's hearsay speculation, just for conversation. Who knows when they'll do that? But when they do, and they'll go up at some point before we die, they have to. You're gonna wanna be prepared for those interest rate increases from a liquidity. So whoever manages your liquidity, that's the person in your office that manages the monies that's sitting inside your walls until you have to pay an invoice, and the money you're collecting and so forth. Your working capital, for those of you that came from the private sector world, this is a working capital discussion. That's 14 days benefit. Over a year, that's a significant increase. Now, interest rates being low, it's minor, but they'll be better someday. This is where you have, from a corporate finance or a financial perspective, this is where your organization can get benefit from keeping the money longer, pay the bank on day 44. Now, some banks do speed of pay where you pay them before the 44th day, and you get a little better, you get a bump on your rebate. That depends on the bank. Those are some, not all do that. So this is the other advantage. So rebate's number one, the float is number two. This is a chart you can use to explain to your folks around that didn't come today. This is how the industry works. It's not a JP Morgan thing, we just created a picture, but this works on everybody's P card program that does industry standard stuff. I'm sure there's some variation somewhere. Okay, any questions on that? And I've got 5 minutes, so I don't want to mess up your next speaker. We've done most of the single-use discussion already, but just want to go through, this is some data how, when I said earlier, the newest thing in P card is single-use programs. So this is some facts for you. We've seen since 2009, 2011, an increase in spend, that's vendor payments, total spend by organization. For the industry, increased by $35 billion. So a 67% increase on plastic card pay on receipt spend as SUA programs or e-payables have been introduced. 35% in large and mid-market, 12% increase in government not-for-profit. Government not-for-profit industry, I do this all this, that's where I work every day, those type of customers. They always sort of follow the folks that do the bleeding edge stuff. They don't want to get cut. They don't want the reputational risk. They do what's proven and what works, and now they're adopting. So the past couple of years, and right now, my government clients, my higher eds, my not-for-profits, are all talking about this because they see the benefit, and it's been proven by other organizations that are taking all the risks and up front. The SAP, the Oracles, those vendors have put in capabilities to support this. Or Banner is a higher ed ERP. I don't know if you're using that or not. Probably using Advantage if you're using government type of tools. Next one is higher transaction value. 52% of the spend below $2,500 per charge on a captured card. This is going up than it used to be. So we're seeing 9% increase in the 10 to 100,000, 11% increase in the 2.5 to 10,000, and under 2,500. Yes, some people are moving away from P-card and onto SUA, reducing the number of cards they have issued. That's an audit risk usually for your organization. The auditors don't like having many cards issued, so they want to move more to SUA. Vendors don't care if you're paying a big invoice or a small one. They take it, and SUA helps address audit risk in that regard. Okay? So on this graphic, the dark blue is increased, the medium blue is, or the middle bar is stayed the same, and the bright bar is decreased. So we're seeing in this graphic, the US payment types over the past 2 years, checks have decreased 68%, e-payments have increased 78%, we're seeing purchase cards about the same, staying flat, some have increased, and these are some of the benefits on the right. Again, more data to support business cases to look at this type of change. I've already described why you sort of want to use a P-card. It's for the invoices that are too big for traditional purchase card, but sort of below a wire level, so that middle piece that's not been captured. Organizations are capturing this on their e-payables program and growing the total spend, which drives their rebate and also their flow. You mentioned Positive Pay a minute ago, which is a great control feature. E-payables programs have all the benefits of the benefits you have on ACH and check and purchase card, but they have more. So you have electronic process, rebate potential improved. DSO is days sales outstanding. That means the DSO for the revenue coming in. They help on the vendor side. They improve the vendor's DSO because they get paid faster. Electronic remittances and other benefits and features. So the single-use programs sort of combine banking products into one in that regard. Here's a process flow map. We're almost out of time. How the process works. Basically, as you're approving payments to be made, the type of payment the vendor will accept. If they're interested in saying that it can be a single-use e-payables vendor, you flag any payables on their record. You go say yes, pay them other method of choice that we've set on the system. Your system sends a file every day or whatever your periodic time frame is, maybe it's weekly. Pay these vendors with an e-payables payment that comes to the bank. The bank formats it, issues card numbers, sends that to all the different suppliers you're paying that are in their network. Those entities get a message electronically. They then charge those account numbers for the invoice amount. It's the exact dollar amount to the penny, usually within a 10 or 20 day date range, and those are parameters you set up with your bank. And if they don't do it, the card goes away. And once they've done it, the card's no longer valid. It's good for one transaction. That's where you get your positive pay-like benefits because they can use it one time. That's how come auditors love this. The transactions post back to your bank. You get a confirmation file, and you get a paid file at the end. So you can do your reconciliation, just do file matching. It's all automatic, all using the systems. That's a very fast walkthrough of that flow, but I think we all got it. And I will leave you with this summary. So confronting cost in a payables organization, 3 things. First thing is, if you're still writing checks, look at what it's costing you. How much does it cost, and can you continue to afford that expense? Number 2, leverage the best technologies that are around there and services. So look at what's available. What are the technology solutions that are out there? Just to talk about a few. And then for those things that are not your core competency, do you need to keep printing checks? Can you move those to a provider that prints and mails them for you? That's one way to take cost out of the equation. And some questions to ask from your payer's perspective, if they're ready to take an electronic payment. That wraps up the content. Sorry about the little snafu at the beginning, but we recovered nicely. I hope you agree. I'll take questions or we can wrap up.
Yeah, You know, the people that come up to you and violate your social distance that are taking, they've got a device on them that take information from your credit card. Is the chip going to eliminate that, or you still have a problem with the chip?
Okay. The chip doesn't eliminate it because the chip's not encrypted. But here's the thing, the chip is smart. It knows every time you use it in the machine and it talks back to your bank, the bank changes a variable in that chip for the next transaction. So if they could do that and do some research that the media loves that story. It happened by a researcher in Cambridge, England. They happened one time. There's a big debate if this is a real risk or not. The next time they use that number, let's say they captured it, worst case, let's say they did it. The next time they used it, the number has changed. They don't know the new number because you purchased once. That number changes by the bank. They couldn't use it again. So if they captured it, if they knew what they were doing, and they did create a chip, and chip cards compared to plastic is like 10 to 1 cost. You get a Magstrike for 50 cents, a chip is $2 or $3. Criminals aren't making EMV chip cards that we've seen so far. Now, I'm not saying they won't, but the cost of them is much higher, and it's only good for one time. So, but again, that's James's opinion. I'm not saying it's not
So
possible.
you probably should still carry it in a protected sleeve.
I don't have mine there. I've never had it. I travel over the country every week. I've been out of the country a couple of times.
But do you have a chip?
Huh?
Yeah.
I have it too. I'm on 2 cards. So that's me. This is James's opinion. Don't quote me. I'm just saying what I think. Do some research. If you really want to know about that more, go to the smartcardalliance.org. Smartcardalliance.org. That's the industry group that has the best knowledge. They write tons of white papers. I'm on a couple of their councils. So is every bank in the world and every technology provider. Go to that website. On the left-hand side, you'll see industry white papers. Go to the Payments Council and look for a white paper that talks about that issue that's been out there a couple of years. That might help you with EMV to see what the security is. Yes?
I have a question about outsourcing payment. Does the bank, aggregate payments from other entities onto one check?
No. Well, when we do it, no. I can't speak for my peers, but I don't believe they would do that.
Okay, so
Now,
then we would.
These are still one check per, yes. If you say, pay this vendor 5 invoices and put the 5 invoices in the remittance data field, that's if you tell the bank to do that on your file. But no, they won't, no. I won't say never, but if they did that, they open themselves up to bigger issues, and I doubt anybody's doing it. But I know,
We would still have outstanding checks and still follow them.
yes. And if we were to do it for you, we would never do that, unless you did that yourself. Any other questions? I hope this has been helpful. I'm happy to stay and answer questions in the back. Thank you for your patience earlier. We apologize, but you were very gracious to let us recover, and y'all have a great rest of your day.
Good morning. I'm gonna go ahead and get started with our next presenter, and we have Shonda Williams with the Texas Education Agency and the Division of.
Office of School Finance and the Division of Financial Accountability.
There you go. And we have Michael Needham as well, and welcome. And so they'll be here to provide you with information and updates, and fire away all your questions. So again, thank you for being here, and we appreciate and welcome you to come and visit us at least a couple of times a year to give us updates, and please help us welcome.
I'm naturally loud because I have a 10-year-old son, so I didn't think I even have to come. I'm Chanda Williams, if you guys didn't hear. This is Michael Needham, and we're with the Texas Education Agency, Office of School Finance, and the Financial Accountability Division, under our Associate Commissioner, Lisa Fisher. Today we'll be talking about the FASRAG. Anybody familiar with that? Am I in the right room? Which is the Financial Accountability Resource Guide. A lot of people in this, like business managers, people who do the actual finances, consider schools and accounting firms. How many, do we have any charter school representatives in here? Okay, great. So I do have a little section at the end that pertains to you guys. So the FAS rag, as you all know, is very, very short, right? It's almost like 800 pages, and it's very easy to read, very user-friendly, right? No. We even have to still go through it and pull our hair out and scream and blow it or something. So the goal of it was to streamline it, make it more user-friendly, make it to where what you're looking for you can actually find, and not have to have a translator. Our actual direct manager, Belinda Dyer, is working on the updates as we speak with a technical writer, so hopefully it'll be more easy to understand and more fluent. It's estimated, I use that word very loosely, that it will be completed, these two modules, module 1 for the ISDs, module 10 and 11 for the charter schools, by December. We're hoping, fingers crossed, just don't. Is that recorded? Just don't say I said that. So what are we gonna focus on? First, we're gonna do links to GASB and FASB. Right now, if you go into the actual FASRAG, it's kind of a static document that's just PDF, Word version. It doesn't really have any links to what the rule may be and why you have to do it this way. So we want to incorporate the links to GASB and FASB. So we can actually go to the rule, see why we're asking you to code this way, and hopefully make more sense of why it's asking you to use that particular code instruction. These are the ones, module 1, 2, 3, 4, and the next slide, the ones that we're thinking about deleting. When I say deleting, it will still have references for what the budgeting, purchasing, audience stuff correlate to. It just will be a part of the module 1 for ISDs and the module 10 for charter schools. So the information will still be in there, it's going to be way down. Way. Leave that for a second. For purchasing, the appendix for purchasing, we're looking at keeping because it is so heavy in volume and purchasing is so involved. So the actual module 3 of purchasing could possibly go away, but the appendix that you'll use, you can go to and still be able to find the information. Do you have a question? These are the models we're looking about to leave as well. So this will be version 16, which will include the revisions since the version 15. I'm sure most of y'all are familiar with the new GASB 63 and 65 for the deferred inflows and outflows that your auditor has to put into your AFR. The pre-K take codes, program intent codes that are changed and updated, that will be in there as well. And then any FASB updates will include it to the module 10 for the charter school. So, right now the way the FASRAG is structured, it's like a running ledger, if you would, of codes that you're supposed to use for 6100 codes you can't code to this, which creates a really lengthy volume. So what we're thinking about doing is creating a chart that's at the very beginning of the FASRAG of codes that are reserved, required, that you have to use based on whatever you're coding for your account structure. Depending on, right now the codes can be reused after 10 years as we're thinking about. We have so many codes that are clear, that are in the FASRAG that are not used and just taking up space. And so we want to make it to where we can reuse them after 10 years, because eventually we're going to run out of numbers in coding. So we're going to have to be able to reuse those codes after 10 years. Another big thing is the plain language. I'm sure most of you guys have tried to read the FASRAG. It actually cures insomnia. I don't know if you know, but I actually have used it for that. And so we're trying to get it where we have a technical writer now that's working on it with Michael as well and Belinda Dyer to make it towards more user-friendly, where you can actually understand the FASRAG. I know that sounds like an oxymoron, but that's our goal. So does anybody have any questions to this point?
Are there gonna be a lot of changes in the codes that we're required to use right now? Do you anticipate there will be changes?
Not the actual coding, like the fund, the function, the object, sub-object, not that actual part. But just more of the fact of the language that goes with it, and we're gonna make it more of a resource guide, less of a manual, so they'll have the links. So the rules that are adopted and become statute, there'll be a web link. You can click on it, for instance, first. You click on it, it'll take you to that. It will not be in the actual flash drive, all of that language that has to be taken to it. It will have the required codes that you need to do for your PINS reporting and account structure and your local client codes that you can use. Anybody else? So Mike is gonna start from this point and talk about, some of the other updates that are going on. Oh,
Can y'all hear me? Can y'all hear me? Okay, good. So, there's been House Bill 5 and House Bill 2. Both of these have changes to our first system. In House Bill 5, we're merging the first indicators with what we were using as solvency indicators. And in House Bill 2, it shows that we have to revoke charters that for any combination of substandard, academic, or financial ratings for 3 years, those have to be revoked. The commissioner doesn't have flexibility on that. So I actually went and looked for House Bill 5 and Senate Bill 2, and I found them on a website called Legiscan. You can actually find the actual text of those bills, and that information is pretty clear. It's not too much legalese. A website called Legiscan. It's Legiscan. Legiscan. Yeah, .com. And it has the bills for all the states. You just pull down the Texas drop-down menu. If you want House Bill 5, you type in HB 5. If you want Senate Bill 2, you type in SB 2. So anyways, the deadline for these new rules to be applied is March 2015. I think that's for House Bill 5. I think Senate Bill 2 is already in place. There's additional requirements from House Bill 5. So we're going to have a lowest rating for school districts and charter schools if they fail critical indicators. That's just like what we have now. And it says there's also a category of indicators leading to financial distress. So right now we're kind of looking at maybe 4 critical indicators and 15 other non-critical indicators. It's similar to what we have now, but we're swapping out some of those indicators. So it's just going to be those 2 categories. The second category, the non-critical indicators, those have point values just like they do now. And just like right now, some indicators have a range of point values. That's what we're looking to continue going forward with. The final publication for ratings is August 8th. So we have to post the final ratings for school districts and charter schools by August 8th each year. We already went over those stakeholders. It's districts, open enrollment, charter schools, and education service centers. When we go create this new first indicators and merge the first insolvency writ system, it's going to be reviewed by the comptroller's office to receive their thumbs up and their approval. We recently did a survey of top indicators for financial management and solvency. We closed that survey in May 18th. So from what I've looked at through the survey, the most common things that people mention is fund balance, days cash on hand, whether or not audit was turned in on time. Certain liquidity ratios like the current ratio, and then there's debt to assets. These things are really mentioned very frequently by both charter schools and school districts. We're looking to update certain indicators. Actually, all of them are, we may tweak all of them, but so far on this list we have a student to teacher. We actually might get rid of that, but the student to staff ratios, we're still interested in keeping. The fund balance is one that people mentioned a lot. The data quality one that exists right now, we're going to keep that. And then looking at the debt ratio as a percentage of debt to total assets or total liabilities to total assets. So we're looking to keep that. We're looking to add new ones that are sort of more traditional ways of looking at it, like days cash on hand. And then there are indicators that that we're looking to get rid of. Nobody likes investment rings on the 3-month treasury bill rate. It's not popular with you guys. It's not really popular with us either. There's something else is that when we look at the debt to asset ratio or the liability asset ratio, that may be a new indicator coming up because of pension, underfunded pension, and other post-employment benefits. Those underfunded liabilities may be very huge for you guys. We might not want to use that as part of the financial analysis because nobody's going to have really a lot of time to be able to change that in the near future. And that's something that's coming down from GASB to you. So, and we're more concerned about your near-term solvency. Do you have any questions? Any questions about the first or solvency?
Why would you consider getting rid of the
So, what happened is, so when you're looking at student-teacher ratio and staff, student-to-staff ratio, the whole idea behind the student-teacher ratio is to see if people have declining enrollment, but they don't reduce the number of teachers to match declining enrollment. So you may have a small school district that sees, population decrease, but they want to keep all their teachers on staff, and that payroll expense doesn't go down, but the money you receive from state funds would decrease. That's why people originally had it in there. But the student to staff ratios is almost capturing the same thing. It includes administrative staff. It makes sense to look at it from the holistic perspective of the whole school district, or in the case of charter school, is the whole charter school, not just teachers.
I don't know, the only observation I can share with you on that is that using the student to staff ratio is diluted, and student to teacher ratio is much more meaningful to me because 2/3 of the payroll is related to teachers, so I would get rid of it.
Well, the counter argument was that there are some charter schools that use very small class sizes, but they also have very small overhead with other administrators. And so that's why we're looking at the whole of the payroll instead of, say,
Maybe
just a
charter-
chunk of it.
Maybe charter schools could have their own ratio.
Yeah, we can look at that. Do you have any other questions? And we haven't finalized any of these. Go ahead.
To go back to the fast track and changing all of that, do you have users of the fast track that you're talking to? I know one in particular is the include exclude, takes a lot of space, but it's really valuable.
We do, can everybody hear me? We do have a committee that's speaking with people that's like Belinda and Michael and Joel and the technical writers in regards to what they feel is important. Nothing has actually taken place as far as the deletions your ideas that we are, trying to put into place for the fast track. Right now, with the try to have December deadline, module 1, we completed fund and function, right?
Yes.
Okay, and then for the same for the module 10 and 11. So there is a committee, to answer your question, and so, but if that's something that you feel is important, I definitely get your information and pass it along. Because you're obviously,
We use it a lot.
yeah, well, you're obviously the end user, so that's the most important. You do have to use it. Our main philosophy and thinking, was to streamline it and get it short, and not be like a manual, it's more than a guide. It's just supposed to guide you, we're not, maybe you have requirements that we need to use for PINK reporting, obviously, but add the links, the web links and stuff to make it shorter. So, more user-friendly document. Any other questions with the FASRAC, or the first solvency merge?
Well, I'd like to just say, I applaud Lisa and Dawn, Fisher and Chris Watson for taking on this and taking this forward. You know, before FASRAC or FAR, some people had built in 679, and
You've been around a while.
a lot.
I mean, that's good.
Yeah.
Not to be.
So, no, that's fine. And so, you know, just thank you, your department for doing this, because it's gonna benefit
I hope so. Like she said, we do have like committees looking at it to see. We obviously use it frequently when we do technical assistance for questions, but you guys use it every day, and it's something that needs to be more friendly for the school district and charter school. I know I was a business manager for a charter school for about 5 years. When I first came in, and someone told me that, I was like, what is this? What am I gonna do with this? I can't even understand it. So it can be very daunting, and so we're hoping to definitely make it easy.
I want to add something about the first indicators. We're looking to have more of a bell curve instead of right now some huge gigantic percentage. It's a superior rating, and doesn't really tell people where they can improve. So we're looking to have more of a bell curve, and right now sometimes there's a large percentage of charter schools that don't pass the first ratings. That's kind of an issue too.
Does everybody know the preliminary first ratings are out? Okay, just making sure. 'Cause
So, if you're gonna expand on that, if you're gonna attempt to do that, that means you're gonna make it tougher.
How's that?
The first,
why would they go first?
the requirements are gonna get harder to be superior.
But more people would end up being in that middle range.
So
We're looking to have fewer people fail, and then think of it as A, B, C, and fail. So fewer people, we're looking to have fewer people fail, more people end up in that medium
So
range.
you're gonna have a lot of fewer people
In the superior category.
So you're gonna have to make it more difficult to be superior.
It's just a point value system. We can shift the point values. So the individual indicators, some of us that
Oh, so
it's
you're
the
not-
same, but we may adjust the point values.
So you're not gonna make it more difficult, you're just gonna change the point scale.
Yeah.
For instance,
there's-
some are like automatic fail. He's looking at whether maybe put him on a scale. Like, you don't necessarily have an automatic fail if you don't turn your AFR on time, but you may lose this points based on when you turned it in. Slides.
But if you turn it in more than a month late, then they can't calculate anything for you, so then you have to fail.
That answer your question?
Some of the indicators come from your financial report, your data feed. And so we would use that information. And those have more of a sliding scale on points.
Some other important information that we're looking at is this year, 13-14 annual financial compliance report, the AFRs. Data feed errors will not be corrected. This year, we've had several districts that entered in information data feed that was very wrong, and went ahead as a courtesy to correct it. That will not be the case after this year. The Excel template will be required for charter schools. Are you familiar with the, you guys are charter school, not Are you familiar with the template that you have? also know how to get to your TTAA correspondence from the website to the administrator address. You know what that is? The updates that happen usually come from different divisions. A lot of people don't quite know how to get there, but if you go to the A to Z index, on our name page, you do T, and then scroll down to the administrator address. It has all of the correspondence from all the divisions within TEA. When it talks about changes to FIRST or changes we're doing with ASRAG. I think the latest one that we sent out was a preliminary first rating notification. So, it's usually very helpful to see. So this is for charter schools. You have the AFR data template that you have to upload by the 115th day of the charter school's fiscal year. And it has a link. If you go to AAC Index on our website, hit C for charter schools, and then scroll down, it will have this information. And then the laws and rules related to the AFR being submitted under TAC. And this is just what the AFR template sample looks like. And a lot of our ISD, so it's like apply. Other impacts of the substandard ratings. Right now, it will be requirements to receive professional services if the district or charter receives a substandard. I know that you're currently working on that for a couple of charter school ISDs. And kind of a catch-22. We're going to require you to receive professional services to help understand why you're failing your ratings for the portion of it. Charter renewals, right now, after 5 years, if you received a substandard rating, you will not go to an automatic renewal. You will have automatic if you haven't received any substandards, and you'll also have a discretionary. This gray area, there will have to be another kind of cursory review to see if you are going to get your renewal. And then also there's the new bill that passed. If you failed 3 years in a row with either academic or financial, our schools, your charter will be revoked permanently. So. Another information is Rider 71 funding. That's why I asked about the TTAA letter. That went out May 21st. I probably can't see the back. It's like that. Does everyone know about the Rider 71, the TRS supplement? These are the object codes we're suggesting that you use, the expenditure object codes to report it, reporting. In the correspondence, it tells you where you're going to get your money in the actual FSP money, but if you go to line 6 of the other program detail reports on your summary finances, it will tell you the actual amount you get based on your APA. It's a one-time. And then this is the end. This is our information. This is Belinda Dyer at the front, the top, who is our manager, and she's the one that actually is performing the FASRAC updates with our technical writers. My information's in the middle, and then Michael's is at the bottom. Those are actual real numbers we will answer. We get that all the time. Are those real numbers? Yes, we will answer those. We'll go right to our phones. Sometimes they're forwarded to our cell phones. So we're here for technical assistance. We offer a lot to school districts and charter schools called in. Do you guys have any other questions about FASRAC or FIRST or solvency or Rider 71, deferred inflows, outflows? It's kind of the newest things that are going on. How you guys are easy.
So accounting questions, sometimes people up and how do I do this journal entry? We haven't done this in like 7 years or something like that. I'm a CPA. I work in this group, so you can send emails to me about accounting questions, about how do I structure this journal entry. I give you some general advice.
Got it? Well, thank you guys. We appreciate it. We will get on the road back to Austin and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.
Thanks for having me here today. My name is Michael Gonzalez, and I'm over the division. Can you hear me back there? Great. With Houston Independent School District, and we run the consultant division that works with school districts for the charter program, and sort of indirectly as well with your MAC program. But don't know, how many districts participate in SHARS? I see the show. Everybody does, okay. And we actually have a pretty good program with SHARS. And one of the things that we do is we roll out our program. The main concerns for the district that is, how do we meet compliance? You may be audited by Office of the Inspector General with the state or at the federal level. It has to deal with a lot of federal complications because it comes in, you're bringing down, federal dollars, but it changes with, some accounting practices at the TEA level, comes in at the 199, there's a reconsideration, so it's better you redistribute state dollars when it's back to your district. But at the cost report level, there's a couple of maneuvers to make sure that you're accounting for it, in the way that the Fed, your tax audited, we'll say that you're meeting, the requirements. But let's get started. One of the things that we just did last year is we're part of this Hasbro strategic partner, and it's been a good partnership. We work with Hasbro and some of the other agencies as well, when it comes to not only SHARS, but a couple of other components that directly impact school districts as well. Jackie's gonna run my slides, and when I press the button, they always go haywire, so she'll keep the slides in progress for that. But we have about 22 years experience with SHARS. We were first school district to bill for SHARS back in 1992. Worked with the state on how the SHARS program works, and it's prescribed in your IEP documentation pursuant to IDPA, and the school district is providing these districts day in and day out with special needs. And if they're Medicaid eligible, obviously you can offset that up to the feds, and that's how you receive funding for SHARS for interim payments. And who knows nothing about SHARS, so I don't know how much detail I can go into. But I can show you, it's like, what's SHARS? Yeah, I saw your, okay. Anybody else? Okay, it's okay, you can raise your hand. Yeah, because a lot of people really don't want to know about SHARS. But we've been in the business for 22 years. We actually generate the most revenue of any other school district in the state of Texas. But in 1999, 2000, the school board approved that we can go out and work with other school districts as well with SHARS. That's what we've pretty much been doing. I'll tell you about the fantastic job that Houston's doing. But the main thing is that as part of that service that we provide, it's excellent customer service. Even though we're a school district, we also know that if you're working with school districts, it's about keeping your market share. And how do you do that? With excellent customer service. You have to have that business model. You want to expand your market, but how do you keep your market? With excellent customer service and comprehensive services, and very competitive about the service you're receiving as well. Okay, so we bring that to the table as well. We have a web-based application called eSHARS, and on the background we have GE, which is GE Health Systems. And so to meet HIPAA and some of the parameters of what HHS, Health and Human Services, wants and needs, we have to run the GE Health System in the background, the eSHARS system in the front, and that's the system that makes it really easy for nurses and speech therapists, psychologists, all the clinicians that provide these services day in and day out. Next slide. These slides are kind of neat. But what we're most proud of, and I was mentioning earlier, the HHD has been the consulting side for the SHARS program since the 1999-2000 fiscal year. But whether you participate with Houston or not, you're benefiting. Let me tell you why. Is that Houston has taken a leadership role, and we have Dr. Rod Page actually to thank for that. At that time, our superintendent was really concerned about school districts participating in SHARS, but he found out that some districts were paying 33% of their revenue going to a consultant, somewhere in Michigan or Austin, or a lot of these companies were out of state, not even in the state of Texas. But the thing is that they were in harm's way too, because you were receiving revenue, but if you were subjected to audit, you couldn't keep that revenue and go through the embarrassment of not meeting the audit. So one of the things that we did is that we started working with big school districts early on. Now, regardless of the size of the district, we work with all districts, regardless of the size. Not only scales from large districts to small districts, we work with all of them. But what's nice is that whether you're participate with Houston or not, you're benefiting from a lower rate. So right now, we're sure the marketing lady, what is your rate now on the average for one of your contracts?
It's about 4.5%.
4.5%. Okay, so, you know, you can think about, all these other school districts in the other 49 states, they don't have Houston ISD, they're bringing competitive, factor into providing the sharp services. They're still paying, you know, anywhere from 20% to above that for the service that they're receiving. But because Houston's involved, with its product and this particular service, you know, if we're gonna submit, our proposal, whether it's for interlocal or interagency, contract or for an RFP process, we're not afraid of the, RFP process. We'll submit our bid, and it's 4.5%. If the company doesn't meet that, then obviously they don't. But the point is, we should receive the same comprehensive service. So when we first started in 1999, we tried to figure out how to price this, and we were originally going to go through Region 4. We had an agreement with Region 4. We're going to train them on how to throw this to all these schools, the state of Texas. Well, they sat on it for about 24 months or whatever. Dr. Case says, well, we can't wait anymore. School districts should be really we charge too much for the service. So when we started pricing it out, we priced it about 10%. And our goal and our promise to our member districts were that as we automated this process and as we refined the business protocol for how we roll out this product, we would further reduce that cost to our member districts. So the learning curve on that was pretty fast. It went from 10 to 9.5 to 9 to 8.5 to 8 to 7.5, and it continues to go down because we've refined the process. We've come up with the electronic claiming mechanisms for how the system works and so forth. So what we've done is we've further reduced the cost of operations to bring it back to your district. So now Charlene just told you what the amount is. So every year we've done a pretty good job of bringing it down to a percentage that means that more of that revenue comes to your special ed program, and services program, or whoever uses, you know, these dollars in your school district. So, you know, that competition matters. Yeah, in Texas, Houston has proven it does. And so in Texas, regardless of whether you participate in Houston's program, you benefit, period. And that's a good thing. We talked about our comprehensive service and what we provide as a school district to other school districts. And so we have two sides of the coin over here. One on the other side is finance. And so what we find is a lot of vendors are out there, which is pure billing, just billing. That's all they do. But if you're subjected to some type of review by the state Health and Human Services Commission or the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, you might have to know more about your billing. And what would you have to know about? You know, what does your MOE look like? Are you doing the revenue offset on your cost report on the HHS side? And so there's a lot of parameters that have to come into play. Medicaid doesn't want to pay for anyone who's not Medicaid eligible. They're not obligated to do that. By federal law, they can't even pay you anyway, but the only reason they can is because there's some legislation in place that says if you have a special needs kid and pursuant to IPEA, if their IEP are documents that relate to services, Medicaid's obligated to pay. Other than that, the free care rules kicks in, and regular kids that would come to your school district that aren't under IEP or are, you can't be able to pay for them because they're not obligated to pay if you provide that service to them to any student as part of your responsibility to the school district. So when we look at the compliance side, that should be the finance division, how you're accounting for actual costs, not budgeted costs, how you're accounting for positions that are federal, not state and local. Those parameters come into play, and we do an excellent job on that because we are a school district. We have to follow cost report. We have to do certification expended funds as well. We develop an IP ratio just like the district. We have to develop a one-way trip ratio as well. What's nice about our program is our computer technology, as we're building throughout the year for your district, we're developing those ratios for your district, so we're certifying the accuracy of them. You're good at that checking. And so it's 99.99999 whatever percent with a standard deviation of what Jackie's view says, but it's pretty accurate. And so you're using these numbers, or you're looking at the review put these numbers, what the cost report does is it says, okay, you have your total cost, you back out your federal revenue offset for anything that's federal, right? Then you have your ratio for MAC. It kicks in effect your revenue percentage from RTS. Then you have your total cost, and then it goes through some other gyrations for administrative cost rate that's added into there. Well, what becomes important is your IP ratio. You can drive your ratio, it dictates how much cost goes into that cost report when you have your cost report settlement. It will determine whether you either pay 24 months down the road or whether they haven't paid you enough. Now, we worked with, I don't know, it's just in the last year, but we met with them at Halfling about a year ago, and they walked up to our booth and said, hey, why would we have to pay $1.6 million back? Well, I don't know, I haven't seen your cost report, but they help your schedules, having to look at your MOE, see if maybe you have too much federal, maybe your federal offsets off on your cost report. Maybe when you did certification and expended funds every quarter, you didn't realize you had more federal than state and local, so how can you certify, the federal drawdown? And that's what that whole process is all about. Well, when we go back to realize that we did gap analysis, they were really in harm's way. But they didn't know until, when you file the cost report, it's 6 months after the federal fiscal year ends on September 30th. So this September 30th of 2014, we file our cost report for this fiscal year on April 1st, 2015. They reconcile it 24 months down the road. So you don't know you're in harm's way until 30 months down the road, because 24 months is what the federal regs say that they have to actually audit your cost report. But you've already had a 6 months delay from September 30th to April 1st. So during that time, you have to sleep at night thinking that your cost report's correct. Do you have enough federal? Do you have too much federal? Do you have enough state and local? You do not have enough. Is your IP ratio correct? Is your one-way trip correct? So that's what happened in this particular district. 2 years later, they were blindsided by, the feds want their 1.6 million. And then they don't take them for the answer that way. So that's the funny part, but it's not really that funny because we just had a district, Burger Portland, they had the same thing, they had an audit. And, they had to pay back, they were breaking some cost reports. So for a small district with 74,000 and 15,000, the other cost report, but they didn't know that until 30 months after they had been already processing all their claims for interim payments as well as the cost report. So will their current cost report probably be the one that they just filed April 1st of 2014 be wrong? Probably, but they won't know until 2 years down the road. Will the other one that will come up this year for reconciliation that was filed in 2013 April 1st be wrong? Probably, because they followed the same type of methodology for how they file their cost report. So that is a big part of it. So when we talk about comprehensive services, that's true on the finance side. So what about the service side? You have nurses, speech therapists, diagnosticians. Our diagnosticians are looking for shopping. Our nurses. What about LVNs? So the point is that that's the other side that the finance division usually doesn't have. Because you're busy with debits and credits and balancing and doing all those other things and payroll ledgers and whatever. You don't know what's going on this side. They're providing all these services. You're a nurse, you're billing for everything you're providing. You don't know if the child's Medicaid eligible. You don't know if the services they're providing are VIP. So what we do is we work on that side as well to mitigate any problems that might happen on the interim billing side. So we monitor caseload. We load down all the caseloads for everything that's provided to kids with special needs who happen to be Medicaid eligible and determine if they're receiving a service for it to be billable, and we're billing the services every week, but if these services aren't in their IPR documentation, you just bill for a lot of services that in the end could be recouped if you're subjected to an audit. So what's part of their audit? And let me tell you what kind of problems we see. Billing for kids on the day that school district's closed. The entire school district is closed, so I could, let's be certain, bill them the day when school district's closed. So that's a real easy type of audit for the state or the fed to come and say, okay, what days were you not there? and then they check and see if your dates of service match GED, that the whole district was off. So why is it that that one person that maybe 10 of these people did that? It happens all the time. Or what if you're trying to bill for someone who's not medicated all the time of service? Happens all the time. Or they look at the special ed folder and see that all the services you've been billed for aren't even in your IPR documentation. You've been billing on some other stuff that was in there, but you didn't bill on that. You bill on the wrong stuff. So our system will track that as well. And then our on-site training, will help mitigate that, because you have clinicians that say, hey, I'm not supposed to go for Medicaid in the school district or for Charlotte services in the school district. Yes, you can. They'll say, I'm federally funded. I'm not supposed to do it. Well, yeah, you can. You can bill them federally funded as long as you back out their cost in the cost report. So you back out their cost with the federal revenue offset, you meet the federal regulation. Yeah, you meet the federal register. Yes. The cost allocation plan for state taxes. Yes. So would we train those particular individuals, or would we train all of them regardless of the population they serve? So excellent. Yeah, we're going to provide that excellent service to you. Make sure that whether you're in the finance side or the programmatic side, we have two teams of people dealing with both sides. Nurse wouldn't know what the accountants and the finance people are saying. What do they think about that? So, we're not going to use the same type of people to go there and try to work with the nurses. They want to hear somebody who speaks their language. They don't want to bill for a gray area that might put them in harm's way, because they're licensed by the State Board of Examiners for whatever their clinical specialties. And so we understand that, we know that. And so when we roll out our training, we're going to say, this is what you do, this is what the state requires. And there's no gray areas with Medicaid. Medicaid says, this is what we'll pay for, no more, no less. You either meet it, and you bill for that, then you are in harm's way. You and your licensure and your district. And we want our money back. Okay, next slide. Comprehensive service. We support all staff. So, the finance side as well as the programmatic side as well. We're friendly. Why wouldn't we be happy customers? Customers have a choice, and they're not happy to leave, right? So we can share that. Online management tools. So eChart, and I don't know if you're going to do eChart's demo, you probably don't have enough time today. But what's fantastic about eChart is it's going to pilot you every step of the way to a nurse or a speech therapist or a clinician. You're not going to get out of harm's way because it's kind of pushing you to what you need to do. So you don't, you're not in some gray area. So it's recognizing what's required for audit and what you need, and it pilots you through there. Electronic claim submission, we have a GE health system on the clinical side. And the reason we need that is when we have, Houston ISD had over 5 million claims, Brownsville, Corpus, Pasadena, Fort Bend, Clearview, Round Rock. All these big pictures out there, you need a big system to handle all that volume. And you have to meet HIPAA. This thing called HIPAA comes out, and you've heard of FERPA because you're in education, so you have FERPA. HIPAA's almost exactly identical, except that it deals with the healthcare complex. Now in FERPA, you violate FERPA, they just tell you, hey, don't do it again. Here's this memorandum of understanding. This is what you did. This is what you need to correct. With HIPAA, the minimum violation is $25,000. So, are we meeting that HIPAA requirement when we use GE? Now, do most other vendors out there use GE in the background? No, they don't know what it is. Are they meeting the False Claims Administration Act? No, they don't know what it is. See, so what I always say, Trains, is you say this, but I always say this, is that a lot of times school districts are with a vendor that know enough about Medicaid to be dangerous, especially when you're in Hartford with HIPAA. So that's where we do our gap analysis. Make sure that wherever you're at, we take that and get you to the higher ground where you should be. In case of provide on-site support, yeah, do that. Finance side, yeah, we're going to work with your finance division and people who are finance and accounting professionals will work with them. And then we're going to do on-site training with your clinical side and work with them. Technical assistance for audit reviews and audits. That's what we did with Dunlap. We first had a relationship with them because they came to us and said, why do we owe $1.6 million back? The Burberry Portland came and said, why do we have to pay back $6 $39,000 one year and $59,000 another year. For a small district, you know, that's like a third or 25% of their profit rate. You know, so we'll provide technical assistance with that because we're monitoring the federal regulations, federal register, state plan amendment for SHARs, Texas Administrative Code, Texas Education Code, and you have different agencies out there. So at the federal level, you have U.S. Department of Ed, and for Medicaid and Medicare, you have U.S. Department of Human Services, and they don't always use the same language or deal with each other very well. At the state level, you have TEA, and you have HHS, and so they don't usually talk so well. And if you'll notice, you received a document back in September 16th of 2013 about SHARs. You receive SHARs revenue, and if you use SHARs revenue for PIC 23 and 33, you had to do this calculation to back out your MOE. And you know, we reviewed Code of Federal Regulations, Cost Allocation Plan, Texas Administrative Code, and we knew they were wrong. We go to the state and say, hey, what's going on? Yeah, you can't do that. You know, you're already accounting for this cost for PIC 2333 on your cost report. You're doing a federal revenue offset on this side for HHS for this cost report that's due 6 months after that federal fiscal year again. So why do you have to do it on the ITA side, on the U.S. Department of Ed side? I mean, you're being discounted twice. So, you know, why were they doing that? It's because the two state agencies weren't talking. So what did Houston do? Leadership role? Yeah. Texas Alliance, we met with them and said, hey, we got to get going on this. TEA's rolling this new rule now, and it's going to shut down SHARs. And it's going to cost HSD about $130 million if they went back to that 5-year. So it was 29, 10, 11, 12, 13, you're going to have to rebate 14 forward. But if we follow their rules, you would have had to back out any cost that your SHARs wouldn't pay for 23 and 33. And it was wrong, and we told them that up front. They didn't want to embarrass them. But we knew they had talked to their sister agency at the HHS. So by February 2nd, they turned that whole thing around, and if you read those two documents, you'll see they had nothing to do with SHARs and the one that was published on February 2nd, because they rescinded all the stuff that they had published, which is a lot of training. A lot of training. They went to Region 4 and trained us first about it. If anybody went to that training, anybody attended the Region 4 training about this, it was back in November. And we knew they were wrong. They were rolling out something wrong. But it was corrected February. So do we do the technical assistance I get that? Do we have to meet what you'd have to meet? Yeah, we're a school district. Next slide. Okay, so program compliance. We're going to maintain your Medicaid regulations and compliance with your protocol. There's 2 protocols out there. One of the state has a different protocol and it's approved. Okay, so the feds will have a Medicaid program for whatever program. Texas probably has over 40 different Medicaid programs. SHARs and MAC are 2 programs school districts tend to deal with. Very Covenant Intervention is another program, but not that issues are part of it. But there's tons of regulations, and they change all the time. And so we monitor the Texas Administrative Code, which usually the state will take whatever's in the Code of Federal Regulations or the Federal Register, and they recodify that in the Texas Administrative Code. So do we monitor both? Yeah, because sometimes there's misinterpretations. By the time it gets to the federal document and it gets to the state one, there's a difference of opinion. But if the feds come down and audit you, they're going to say, ours trumps that one. So what do you do? How do you proceed? You could be in harm's way. We're going to make sure you're not. Okay. So we're going to track and monitor clinicians based on what they do. So if I'm a nurse, let's say, and Jackie's a nurse too, and Jackie's doing all her stuff. She's turning in everything. She's supporting her services we provided, and I'm not. And I'm saying, wow, the system has not caught me. I'm not part of the matrix. And Jackie's doing her thing. Well, if you don't have tracking, they'll never know that, I'm evading the system. Do you think that there's a lot of people who evade the system when you're trying to maximize dollars? Of course you are. So we track all the services we provide. And we say, hold on, Mike's not doing his stuff. Jackie is. Send Mike one of those official ISD letters that say, please be advised that our representative got to do this for these particular cases that are Medicaid eligible, or some other friendly reminder that it's not being done. So we do that as well. We review and supporting documentation for clinicians as well. A lot of times a clinician will term, so they created a bunch of crazy claims. But you want somebody to catch that before it gets to the state. These guys do that very well. They catch all that stuff. You know, it looks like, you know, you're supposed to do 2 units of 15 minutes every week for speech claim, so why is it 99 now? For all their case load. I mean, that's crazy. Some systems should catch that. Well, ours does. Okay. So next one, I got the last one. Verification of clinician licensure. A lot of times, district will bill on clinician. They're not even licensed. They're not meeting their licensure requirements. So a lot of them might work for, let's say they're working for Benta or OBJ or Berman or St. Luke's or whatever, and they say, wow, the healthcare complex is just out of control. I don't want to work for these guys. So I'm going to go to those real nice school districts and work for those guys. Well, they let their licensure lapse. I don't need my license. I'm working for the school district. Yeah, yes, you do for Medicaid. So verification of licensure, yeah, it's important because you could be billing for stuff that a clinician is doing. They're not even licensed by their state board of examiners. So that's important. And so the other thing is that the reverse can be true. They work for all these healthcare hospitals and clinics, but for some reason they were kicked out of there for a reason. And Medicaid has sanctioned them as they can never bill for Medicaid again for the rest of their life. So they're on the exclusion list. So let's say this guy Bob over here is on that exclusion list. You can never bill for Bob, never. That's what Medicaid says. So we check that as well. So if, let's say you hire this person, you don't know that you can't bill Medicaid for it, our system will already have tagged them because we monitor the exclusion list for it. It's mostly dentists and physicians, but it's not usually a nurse or speech therapist or whatever. But for some reason, Medicaid put them on that list, and they probably have their reason. And if you don't get on that reason for no good reason. Anyway, next slide. Standard level of service. What's great about our price and our package is that standard level of service, we're going to do comprehensive finance training. We're going to develop your IT ratio, one wage ratio. We're going to work with your cost report. We're going to give you more training at the state level. And then we're going to have ongoing assistance with the annual cost report. We're going to monitor state and federal legislation. The MOE thing was a prime example. Austin ISD was real concerned about it, and their superintendent called our guys and said, hey, what are you guys doing about it? And when we started working with the state about that, this MOE problem went away. And so BID 2333, not a problem anymore. So we monitor that. We monitor the SHARS program requirements. Sometimes SHARS might go through these renditions of, you know, we need to realize that, you know, it's a school district providing the service, not a hospital district or a hospital system. So they'll come up with, let's say the provider after 9/11, believe it or not, there's some implications about providers. And so what the feds and state wanted was every nurse, every speech therapist, every clinician you had was going to have to get this national provider identification number. And they were going to charge everybody, I think the minimum price was like $500. But you know, that would cost Houston ISD alone about $600,000. It was going to be a 5-year thing. Every 5 years, they had to go through this rendition. Well, you know, that shouldn't apply to a school district because you only have one provider number and you're billing for all of your clinicians in the aggregate total. So, you know, that's probably okay for St. Luke's or Herman or some other agency that, you know, the provider goes to several different locations. They might work out of 3 hospitals. Well, we can see that. But it didn't apply to a school district. So we worked with them on that. Certification process. A lot of times you'll have someone billing on SHARS, but they're not part of RMTS. And sometimes the same person for SHARS is the RMTS person. So just like that algebra equation, you know, it has to be equal to this side and this side. Same thing applies with SHARS. If you bill for SHARS, and so we might work with a district and they're billing for 500 people, nurses, speech therapists, psychologists, or whatever. And on their RMTS list, they have only 150 people. So, you know, you're going to be audited for that? Yeah, chances are you will. Are you working on a variance for that? Yeah, because your cost report's going to show it. You're billing for 500 people, but on your Fairbanks system, it shows no X's by how many people who are billing for SHARS. It's 0 all across there, no X by every quarter. So what we do is, because we know SHARS is important, and RMTS is a very controlling mechanism for SHARS, we monitor your MAC program. We don't have a contract with you on MAC, but we help you monitor MAC. So we're gonna monitor your participant list. We're gonna let you know you're billing 400 people. We wanna see 400 people minimum on your participant list. And everybody that's on SHARS as a provider has to be on your RMTS list as well. Now your RMTS will probably have more people in it, because some people who qualify for RMTS and MAC don't qualify for SHARS, because for SHARS you have to be licensed by State Board of Examiners for nursing services, or nursing, or speech language hearing, or psychological services, or whatever it is, with some exceptions, like TDA, designated speech therapist, might not be licensed by the State Board of Examiners for speech language and hearing, but they're supervised by one. Okay? So we'll monitor that, and is that important? Yeah. I bet half of the people in here don't monitor that, because we see that all the time when we get in the district. You're done for 500 people, and only 2 people are in the participant list. Pretty soon, the state is doing programming, the garbage program and stuff. They have a variance now for that, but eventually we don't want to correlation. When that happens, then that's when the tapioca gets advantage of a lot of people who are shocked by that. That's like, e-solutions for advanced technology. Wow, that sounds fantastic. But that's our SHAR system. And I'll give you a scenario. If you're in a hospital system, you're a nurse, or some other provider, you go to GE, you're doing your thing, you have to go through 10 or 12 screens to do for that one patient. Well, could you imagine all the nurses being upset about that, all the speech therapists and psychologists? They would be with torches in front of the board and complaining about the kind of paperwork. I mean, because that would be an enormous amount of time. And what they want to do is spend time with the kids, providing them the service. They don't spend all the time with paperwork. So we created eSHARS. eSHARS is a one-stop document. So you go to this one screen, it's everything Medicaid needs. And once you get that update, that you're saving that, you know, that documentation for that strategic practices, it ports it over to GE, and then GE does all the magic work for that district. So it's filling out all those 10 screens. So your clinician is not hassled by going to screen after screen. Actually, the Tony Martin is different than hospitals. They would love eSHARS, because then everybody would just go to one screen instead of 10 screens. So that's what it does. But for no additional cost, it's web-based, it's real time, and you know, so you can get on that system from home. I mean, if they want to do that from their house, which I wouldn't imagine a nurse would want to do that, or speech therapist or whatever. But they could be at, you know, one part of the building, if they have Wi-Fi at their school, and it's Wi-Fi. So it's web-based. We have 24/7, so eSHARS is up 24/7. It's there when they need it, okay? It means HIPAA and FERPA. So personally identifiable information, it's secure, it's no standards. And then customer service, we have a call center, and regular hours are from 8 to 5, but they're usually somebody there till 7, so it's kind of a bonus 2 hours in the end. But let's say that they send over to crew or people who train the nurses or whoever is involved with this, and they don't remember anything they were, you know, being in service on. They could call the customer support line and say, hey, this is a fuzzy area, what do I do? Then a human being talks to them. But we also have eSHARS University. And so every day there's a venue going on every other hour. And it's on personal care service, nursing service, speech therapy, psych service, whatever the service is, it's rolling. So it's a person that's training on a webinar. So let's say they couldn't make that live training at your school district. Or they did make that training, but they need further clarification. They can go to a webinar. And let's say they go to the first one and say, wow, this is fuzzy. If they get unfuzzy after the 3rd webinar, they're fine. So it's there. It helps them. Okay, am I doing on time? Okay.
No.
I'm not okay.
No.
So how much time do I have?
5 minutes.
5 minutes, okay. Go to the next one. So we're gonna do that. We're gonna maximize your revenue. A lot of times, districts will deal with their revenue and say, well, I have such low revenue. We just went through this rendition of Dallas, our is it a sister city or a sister, or what is Dallas, or brother or sister, I don't know. Or other, and when you see that, you know, they're not maximizing, well, what are the reasons for that? You know, why is it that, you know, Northeast or San Antonio, Corpus or Brownsville might be maximizing than a bigger district or whatever? So we're monitoring case up. Are you billing for everything that we provided? Every day, your district is providing service, and you have to bill for that service. You don't have to bill it. It's not required that you bill that. But if you want to maximize, you have to bill for that, right? So we track that. So we we're billing. Okay, speed it up. So we're doing maximization. There's no delay. It's electronic claim submission to the state. You're getting weekly reimbursements. They're electronically deposited to your treasury department. There's no shipping costs, no paper. It's being lost on a truck going from your central police station to a school or whatever. It's all, it stays here. Okay. And then we ensure compliance because it's got into that system. Next slide. I talked about that earlier. We're going to work with that. Should go back some more. Okay, how about one more? This is important to these guys. The one before that. Yeah. That. We just saw that at TASA that had been happening from new business officials. So we'll work with your non-supply provision of IDEA. You know, a lot of times you might have a new business official says, "Oh, we're going to have to do budget cuts," and they say, "Well, we're going to cut special ed. We just think they have too much. Well, what does that mean? Well, they just cut positions that are funded by IDEA. They don't realize that the feds have a tricky little rule there. Either you use it or lose it. So if you cut those positions, they're funded, and you're in your notice of grant award, they want their money back. So we'll always monitor that. We'll monitor what your notice of grant award looks like and your MOE to determine that it's in sync. Okay, so we'll work with your budget guys and make sure that from a budgetary standpoint, as you're developing your notice of grant award, anyone who's billing for charge should be state local, and anyone who's not providing a charge, so like a resource teacher, use federal dollars, the IDEA, Part 80, but for a nurse, a speech therapist, anyone who bills, use state local, and we'll review that. Okay. Next one. Let's see where we're at. Okay. We kind of talked about this earlier. 2 different agencies. Go back one. Yeah. We're going to monitor that for you, and that's important because on the special ed side and Medicaid, a lot of people think, oh, the Medicaid is part of IDEA. No, it's not. It's a different agency. So at the federal level, we're going to monitor HHS, and they have their federal register, code federal regulations, OBA 87 and A133, and that's a cost allocation plan. And so as you're rolling through costs, you might be using costs in your cost report. They're not allowable. Or you're using stuff in your cost report, they don't even meet any of those requirements. So the district may say, well, what is that? Well, there's Office of Management Budget, Circular 87. It is real when you get an audit. So we'll monitor that for you. And then CMS, the Signature Medicare Medicaid, that's the agency that usually will show up and say, hey, you're like today, we're going to audit you. And then HHS, you get Texas Administrative Code, and that's the state agency. So at the state agency, we'll monitor the state Medicaid Office of Inspector General, and then there's 2 contractors at the state level, which is TMHP, Texas Medicaid Healthcare Partnership. They're paying the claims, they're submitting them to them. They either kick them out, pay them, or say, good luck, and we'll deal with that. We'll do all of that for you. And then Fairbanks for your cost report and for your MAC claims as well. On the other side, same scenario. Here's a federal agency. They publish it in federal register, federal regulations. The no supply provision, districts are getting hit hard on that because they're playing really tough ball with that. So from 2014 and forward, it's a good time to look at your MOE, see if you're okay. Make sure that your new baseline for 2014 and beyond is correct. And that if it's not, then from 2015 and beyond, districts can be hit for that. So look at that this year. And so we can help with that as well. And then maintenance of effort, ICA and FERPA. And so at the state agency level, we monitor the Texas Administrative Code, Texas Education Code. And the next slide, I'm almost there. So how do you work with Houston processes involved. We work with your infrastructure development, so, you know, where are you at, where do you need to be? So we do this thing called gap analysis, and believe it or not, most districts have a gap there. And we try to, you know, bring it really close to where you should be, okay? And then so we have to develop all these relationships with the director of nursing, special ed, sometimes they don't get along, or the transportation department, your finance division. We work with all of them collectively, and then your IT department's out there doing their own thing. So we bring them all in and start working with them on different activities. Okay? And then we train, and if it looks like your claims are kind of fishy here, whatever, before we say, okay, so somebody got that, we need more training, so these are the problems we're seeing. So, you know, you fix it on the front side, you don't have that warranty work on the back, right? So that's what we're doing. Next one. Okay, we're almost there. And so RFP process, I'm out of time. Completely. So we can do an interlocal agreement, and Don Bangs, our attorney, he's over our finance division, legal department, and so he'll work with you on those interagency agreements or interlocals, and there's some things that, you know, if you're all in Harris County, so John will be happy about that, but, you know, we have to work with the district on the contract and, you know, what we provide and so forth, but we'll also be part of the RFP process. That's no problem as well. And then that's the last one. Okay, and it's me, I'm running the program, and Charlene, where's Charlene at? Oh, there she is with the yellow bags, and I know where. Any questions? Any questions? Wow, excellent. Okay, and if we can give any service, whether you're working with us or not, no questions, great. Just give us a call. Hey, this is what we're experiencing, what you think, and hey, what you say, what we think.
How many of you are familiar with the Center for Safe and Secure Schools? 1, 2, 3. What is it that you know about us? You just know that we exist? Okay, so the Center for Safe and Secure Schools is a resource for you to help you maintain your campus safe and secure. Our whole goal and objective is to make that task as stressless and cost-effective for you. What we have done in this last year is we have taken leaps and bounds in the state mandated safe and secure school audits that you know you have to go through. How many of you have gone through that safe school audit? And your district, your spring, we just finished, you guys. Anybody else? So you don't, did your school talk about a safe and secure school audit? Okay. Well, every 3 years, every school in the state of Texas has to go through a safe and secure school audit. And we just picked up one. Welcome. And that means that your district can do it internally. They haven't given us that mandate where it says it has to be external. Or you can go through HCD, the Center for Safe and Secure Schools. We hire outside consultants that are safety professionals. We hire law enforcement people that will come onto your campus and will help you assess, help you evaluate, and will help you find the vulnerabilities that exist in your campus that you probably don't even realize they exist because you see them on a daily basis. And so what we help you do is take that outsider's perspective. And every 3 years you're supposed to do this, and this is the last year of that 3-year cycle. Next school calendar year is going to be the first year of the school year cycle. What our goal is at the center is to help you understand that process, help you understand how to obtain that service from HCD, from the center, at a real cost-effective way, and more importantly, to help you be that resource for you so you can use this assessment, this audit that you have to do anyway, but use it as a training tool. Use it to train your administration, use it to train your faculty, your staff, down to even to use it to train the children that go to your campus. campus, your parent volunteers. Everybody matters that sets foot in your campus. If we can develop that kind of cohesive mindset of everybody matters, everybody's responsible for my own and everybody else's safety, then these audits that you have to endure and go through will not be painful at all. What we have done here at the center is we have gone from an antiquated paper form to perform that audit. It was 50 pages of questions that we had to go through. And what we did is we automated it. And we launched this year. What you see is the Emergency Information Portal, resource portal. We lovingly call it ERIP. Mr. Omesqua calls it My ERIP. And we've worked really hard and we're really proud of it. It does have, as you can see, the third tab from the left moving to the right is the assessment. This, what you see here, is an emergency management program. The assessment is an added value to what the program is. We have worked really hard to streamline, to make that emergency operation planning task a lot easier. And we understand that we're walking into school campuses where administrators are now tasked with that task of writing the emergency operation plan, possibly even giving the internal training. How many of y'all have gone through an emergency operation training? So if we were to have a catastrophic emergency in your district, what would we do and where would we go? So this is really our focus here at the center, is to bring that information to you, to bring these resources to you so you can take back to your district and say, hey, this is something that we really need to pay attention to. This is something that we not only have to do it because we have to do it, it's mandated. However, we really do have a sense of responsibility and duty to keep everybody safe. Now, this can be used as a risk management tool as well. And you guys are in the finance and we heard the Medicaid, Medicare, and things of that nature. If we are training, and it is a proven fact that when we are training and we have safety in the forefront of our staff, of our employees, even of whomever sets foot on your campus, people will innately try to do the right thing. They will try to behave appropriately. We just have to make sure that we're telling everybody what the rules of engagement are when they set foot on our campus. So that's got to come from the district level. So what we did with this program is it gives your district leadership access to this program. And that emergency operation plan, as you see, is our first one. Now what we did here at the center is we said, okay, how are we going to get every district that's a member to HCDE to have a uniform emergency operation plan? Every single district is its own kingdom and they have their own rules of engagement. So what we did is okay, we're gonna create a master emergency operation plan template. You probably already have one. You probably have several versions of it. What this will do is this will allow you to upload and maintain and sustain your most current emergency operation plan. And then it will give access to all your administrators, and your administrators at that point can give access to all of the APs that are responsible or that are in that safety committee responsible for the safety of everybody on that campus. So district-wide, everybody's going to be looking at the same document, and it's coming from the district level. So whatever school ABC now doesn't have to struggle in creating their own site plan. They can take the master plan, and we will be happy to help you at site level. We will be happy to help you create your own site-specific plan. Because when we come on site to do our assessments for you, that's what we're doing. We're taking your looking for vulnerabilities that are going to affect you. And then we put it all together and make a district report. So the emergency operation plan is templated. Every district can create its own. Every district's campus or facility can then modify it to a very site-specific, now drilling it down all the way down to that. That's part of what we do. The site data. Site data is critical to first responders in case of an emergency. We did our National Incident Management System training here, and we learned that Harris County is one of the counties in the entire United States that has more catastrophic accidents in our entire country. So with that being said, our first responders are activated a lot more than anybody in the country. So what we thought is we would have live and in full color and image versus blueprints is now with the site data portion to it, anybody on the district to everybody on any campus can take pictures of their campus, of their rooms, of their mechanical, electrical rooms, their main shutoffs, their main gas lines, water lines, HVACs. Now, you go on a campus and a principal has to know this stuff. We're gonna ask those questions. And a lot of the time, I have to be very candid with you, a lot of the time, they don't know where their main water shutoff is, where their main HVAC shutoff is. So what we did is we said, okay, let's make it simple, let's make it easy. We take pictures. We take pictures and we label them and we make them accessible to everybody. So if you've got a brand new AP coming to that district from a totally different district, and they've had this before, they're gonna know where to go, they're gonna know what to look for, they're gonna be able to find that main water image, and they'll know exactly what to tell the first responders, okay? Now the assessment, this is the audits that you guys know you have to do. And what we've done is we've taken the entire state of Texas, because we have big dreams and big hopes, and we're going to expand our services to the entire state. And these are the districts that have currently asked us to help them find these vulnerabilities in their district. So this is what you would see. You would, if you're ask us to do this, you would see your own district, you would open your district, and you would see, do we have anybody here from Aldine? Okay, well, tell Mr. Pinnacle we showed off. So all of his his campuses are listed. So the principal at any particular campus will only be able to see their campus. Now the district, whoever is deemed the fearless leader of this software, is going to be able to see every campus, every facility, everything that the district wants us to audit, okay? You will find a report. You will, there's questionnaires. Let me see if we have one in training. So let's look at maintenance. So there's questionnaires to the audit, and what you are able to do, we are able to do now on the fly, is as we're walking through your site, we are able to take images of the immediate hazards that we are seeing. We are educating as we're walking through what possibly state code that's in violation, possibly what federal code that's in violation, possibly what NFPA, the fire code, it's in violation. And the beauty of this, having it automated this way, is that now whoever's in charge of maintenance there now can go back. This is going to hold people's feet to the fire. So now the maintenance people you've got a picture. So now the maintenance people have to go take a picture of corrective action. Now we have true and in color what we are doing to prove that we are working on continually trying to provide a safe and secure school. So this was really one of our driving forces, is those corrective actions, corrective measures. It doesn't do any good for us to go do the audit. We deliver the audit, we deliver it to your board, and bada bing, we're done. We don't think about it for the next 3 years that we have to do it. What we're hoping this does is we're hoping that it brings the safety and the security of everybody in your district on a continuous daily basis on the forefront. It could be used as a training tool. It could be used as a training tool, so when we intrude onto your campus or onto your facility, your administration building, because let me tell you, you guys, we go into them too. Now, whoever is in charge of that safety is gonna be looking at it with a different perspective, with a different set of eyes. Now it's just not gonna be a chore that we have to do every 3 years. Now it's gonna give us some sense of reality. And risk management, those numbers are reduced significantly when we continuously have training. And the safety, believe it or not, does not have to be a long drawn safety meeting, safety committee, whatever. It could be just 5 minutes. Let's talk about rapturing people in. What was the whole purpose of that? Does anybody know what the whole purpose of us having to show our Texas ID card and getting scanned through? Who can tell me? Okay, pedophilia, scary. But on top of that, we can now, you can adjust, and that's really programmable to what the district in addition wants to see, right? So, but please don't only use that as your major scan through as our visitor policy. Have redundancy, have backups. The paper version is always good, because if we have a bad storm, internet goes out, we need to know that principal needs to know and is fully responsible for everybody on their site, on their campus. Any questions so far on our exciting eRIP tool? So resources, this is really fun. Our resources, we have library for whoever is doing the emergency management. We have information on pandemic information, threat assessments, which means you don't have to wait for us to come do it annually. I mean, in Bonnie's perfect world, in which we're going to push really hard, is to help the districts look at this in a more proactive manner. And possibly, if we could break their district down, like we're going to do Aldine, we just got done with Aldine, 73 sites. So what we're going to do is we're going to divide his district in quadrants, and we're going to divide it into 3, but we divide it into 4, but we're going to as many as schools as we can in the 3-year cycle. So every year, his district is going through an audit. And what he wants to do is he wants us to look at the entire district and say, okay, Bonnie, which area is the one that is really needing the most help? And that's who we will start last. And the schools and areas that need the least amount of help, let's do those first, because they kind of got it already. And that gives those other campuses, those other facilities, time to do the corrective measures from this last audit that we had. So it'll do 2 things. It'll keep the safety and security of your district as a consistent, as a constant. It's not just something we look at every 3 years and how we're going to figure out to pay for it. If we do it this way every year, regardless of the size of your district, it will keep, like I said, the safety and the security of your district in the forefront. And that's pretty much what our goal and mission is here at the center. The library, you're going to see a whole lot of things because we have access to everything. But the library is going to show documents, information that your district wants you to see district-wide. You could add, as you can see down here, you can add certificates. So in your district, requires you to go to certain safety training, we can upload it. Whoever has that admin roles and permission can upload those certs, and whoever's responsible for that now has a place that they're all kept. So facilities, that's a great place for facilities to have, especially if they have electricians and plumbers, and we have to track licenses and things to that nature. That can be tracked within the ERIP system. There you go. The status board, that is a questionnaire for your district leadership when they adopt this, for them to see, okay, what campuses are actually doing this? Have we had an assessment? Has it been completed, yes or no? Has it been forwarded to whomever needs to? And this is gonna give them an idea of where they may need to send some resources to help, okay? And then members, this is the location where whomever has the roles and permissions can add people and take people away and all of that. But the ERIP system is an entire program to consolidate the safety and security of a district, now at district level. So any questions? None? Anybody in here on the safety committee? Anybody in here responsible for any kind of safety? None? How often do you have safety training? Really? Intruder training? How did you like that? Oh yeah, you did it, Brandon. Yeah, that's really good. You enjoyed it. So, Wine is the only district in here that if we had an active shooter would know what to do in their district. Wow. So the center is here as a resource. So if you have any questions pertaining to the safety and security of your district, how you can obtain that and what you need to do and how to do it, please let us know. Give us a call. We're working really hard to keep the district members that are current members proactive. And if you're not a member, please give us an opportunity to come visit with you and share with you the positives and the pros of being a member to the Safe and Secure School. That's pretty much what we've been doing. Is anybody here aware of the Safe School Alert process? So if we have inclement weather in your district, how are you notified? Yes, ma'am. Phone? Yes, ma'am. Phone? How many of you wait on the news to see if you need to head into work or not? Okay, thanks for your honesty. All right, what district are you in? Okay. The center has, HCDE has what we call the Safe School Alerts, okay? Every district, we've got 27 members too, they all come here to get a training, and it's tied into our Office of Emergency Management in Harris County. So the center, what we are to you, for you, is your liaison to Harris County and to the city of Houston in response to the districts are going to use this particular software so they can have accurate information in case of inclement weather, of closures and what's so not. Right? So I would go back to your leadership and say, hey, do we know anything about the Safe School Alerts and what are we doing? We had training this last couple of months ago, and everybody pretty much has been trained and should already know. So when you see that ticker going through that your district is closed, it's gone through Safe School Alerts, and that's why it's out in the media as well. That's part of that Safe School Alert. That's an added value to what it does. Lets the media know. So, any questions for the center about what we do and why we do what we do? No? All right, and then we'll give it
me or from a peer. So please, make this a conversation and not a monologue. If you have, an interesting story to share or something you relate to or a question, please stop me at any point and, let's talk about it. That's why we're here. We're here for you guys to learn. We're here for your benefit. I've picked a few topics to discuss, just to kind of show you where I think we can go, the road we can go down. Number one, since practically all of us are involved in some form of construction, or renovations, or a bond that was passed, I want to talk a little bit about what to look for from contractors in the way of insurance and bonds and things like that. I also want to kind of give a brief update on what's going on with the property and windstorm insurance world. There's definitely some good news there for a change. For those of us who've lived on the coast for the last 10 or 15 years, it's been hard to find good news, so we'll talk a little bit about that. I also want to talk about crime and employee dishonesty insurance. For some reason, in the last 24 months, there have been several incidents, and can't really explain why, but there have been, and so I want to talk a little bit about the insurance policy that responds to that type of incident within your district. If I could just see a show of hands, your non-fajita hand, who here is with a district as opposed to HCDE? Okay, and who here is with Houston ISD? So a lot of Houston ISD folks. Okay, good. All right, great. Well, let's start. I have several handouts, and unfortunately, I don't have enough because I didn't know that the audience would be quite this large. So please, if you would, share with your neighbor. I'll pass these down, and if you'll pass down and kind of scoop together a little bit, we'll make this work. Kind of be like Jesus and the 5 loaves. I think it was 5. 5, Connie? All right, there we go. Oh, sorry. What I'm passing out now are payment and performance. You guys okay? Okay. If you don't need one, then just wave me off. What I'm passing out now are payment and performance bonds. I just want to real briefly go over what a payment and performance bond does and what it looks like. You good? Some bonds. All right. I'll take care. And then the other thing we'll talk about real quickly are certificates of insurance. So let me get these guys covered. You guys can share with it. Got 35 copies, so hopefully that'll get it. Okay, so anytime you are going to hire a contractor or a vendor for that matter to perform work at your district, they need to be showing evidence that they are insured. And the one area that's absolutely critical is workers' compensation. There's actually a state law that says any contractor performing construction work on a school district site has to have and maintain throughout the project workers' compensation insurance. Other than that, though, my understanding is there's no legal requirement for a contractor to maintain any particular insurance. And so don't assume that just because a contractor is bidding on school work, that they have insurance or insurance that meets your specifications. Within every district, there really needs to be a person or a few people on your sides who can walk their way through this certificate of insurance. Okay, because not only does this apply to construction projects, many of you may say, well, we don't have a construction bond going right now, or we're not doing any big construction. It also applies to any vendor that you may be considering hiring. All of your contracts, I imagine, have an insurance requirements section that requires the contractor to maintain insurance. And this document is really the only proof you have that they're complying with that. Now, unfortunately, this document is a little bit like an auto ID card that you all have in your glove box. And let's say that you guys are the police, and would you say yours is expired? Yeah, that's the problem. Let's say you guys are the policeman, and you pull over a contractor, and he says, well, yeah, here, I've got insurance. The problem with this document is you don't know that what's on this piece of paper is actually valid or enforced. Okay, so don't have a false sense of security that, well, they gave me a certificate of insurance. So number one, the carriers must be of a sufficient AM Best or Standard & Poor's rating. Not necessarily. Have you verified that? Have you gone online or had someone verify that these contractors maintain that AM Best rating? There's a lot of insurance companies that are struggling right now with low interest rates for the last several years. That's how insurance companies make their money. They take your premium and they go invest it, typically in safer securities. Well, as we all know, those safer securities have yielded a really low interest rate for a while. So a lot of insurance companies, particularly those who will write smaller contractors, are struggling. So the problem is, and the challenge for us is, this is really the only process that makes any sense, practically speaking. You know, the ideal situation would be that you actually get hard copies of the insurance policies of every contractor, not just the GCs, but the subs who are doing work on your job site at least twice a year. Because remember, these expire every year. Okay, well that's not practical. You know, we can't staff up a department to do that. So we got to live with what we got, and the process we've got is that we're going to set forth insurance requirements in our contract, and at bid time, we're going to ask the contractor or the vendor to produce this document. So just a couple of things, and again, after the meeting, if this is a concern to you, if you want to contact me, we can do something more in depth at your district to help improve the process of insurance verification for contractors and vendors. I'm happy to help with that. But for the purpose of the day, I'll just hit a couple of highlights. You know, number one, again, as I said, and as you pointed out, this is a dated document. It says that a snapshot in time, as of this date, in the top right-hand corner, this is the insurance, according to this insurance agent, that this contractor had in force. Well, that could change tomorrow. If they didn't pay their premium, maybe they just called and canceled it because they couldn't afford it anymore. Okay, so this is just a snapshot of time. Number two, you'll notice this is an Accord document on the top left-hand corner. Accord is a company that produces a lot of standard forms in the insurance industry. And so this is the format and the form that you want the certificate of insurance on. But you'll notice the document begins by saying, you know, this certificate is issued as a matter of information only, and it confers no rights on the certificate holder. By the way, you're the certificate holder. Your name will be in the bottom left-hand corner. So this document confers no rights to you. It does not constitute contract. You can go to the next paragraph. It says it does not confer rights. And if the certificate holder, which is you as an additional insured, the policies must actually be endorsed. The actual insurance policies must be endorsed. Just because an insurance agent issues this document that says you're an additional insured doesn't necessarily mean the insurance company recognizes you as an additional insured. So again, there's just not a whole lot of meat here, but that's all we got. If you move about 2/3 of the way down to where, 1/3 of the way down to where it says coverages, this is a really important point. You know, when you're constructing insurance requirements language in your vendor specs or bid specs or RFP specs, one of the questions always comes up, or should come up, what limits should we require? What's an appropriate limit? Should we require that they carry $10 million of insurance, $1 million of insurance? The answer to that question is twofold. Number one, and I think it should be the first thing you ask, what is the real financial exposure to the district associated with this particular project or this type of work? Typically, if we're talking about hard hats and hammer swinging and tractors and backhoes and that type of blue collar work, the perils and the potential financial exposure and loss to the district are pretty obvious. And maybe it's not even necessarily just loss to the district. It may be financial loss to a third party that's associated in the community, such as families that live near the school, teachers that work at the school. So even though the district enjoys tort immunity, we still want to ensure that the contractors and vendors we're bringing on site maintain the financial wherewithal to protect our community, not just the district as a legal entity. So that's why, did somebody raise their hand? Okay. That's the first question you have to ask when you're trying to determine what limit should be required. Okay, and don't get lulled into the sense of security. Well, these guys are blue collar, not white collar guys. These guys are just professionals. Well, there's some professional service contracts, technology contracts, surveying before you're going to construct, that if you rely as a school district on that work product and it's faulty, that surveyor or that architect or engineer, you relied on their work product and it was faulty, it was defective, there were errors or omissions, that could be a huge financial loss to the district. So blue collar, white collar, professional service, organization, professionals, doesn't matter. You gotta assess and put your risk management hat on. What's the potential risk to us? And then the second question you have to ask is, well, we can't just ask everybody for a $100 million limit. You've got to be business savvy. You've got to say, what's practical? What's we don't want to scare away bidders or vendors from this project because we've got these real onerous insurance requirements. So you're trying to strike the balance of protecting the district and the community and all the stakeholders with, hey, we still need to be prudent stewards of taxpayer money and be able to facilitate competition in this process, so we can't scare people away with onerous insurance requirements. Now, those are two tough objectives, and that's a tough balance to strike, but it's important. Okay. But about a third of the way down, the last sentence in this section where it starts, this is certified, the last sentence says, limits shown may have been reduced by paid claims. Now that's another real deficiency in this system, in this method that we've got, of just getting this piece of paper and saying, oh great, check the box, they're insured. What that means is, just because the guy shows, if you move over here to the far right-hand column, about not quite halfway down, you'll see this limit says general aggregate of $2 million. What that means is the most that liability insurance carrier is going to pay in a given year for all the claims that are brought against that contractor or vendor is $2 million. Well, what happens if contractor's insurance renews in January and in February they're sued and lose for $1 million? The carrier pays $1 million. That means he doesn't have $2 million anymore. He now has $1 million. Because the most that carrier is going to pay is $2 million. So these limits can be eroded. All right. So again, in that case, depending on the hazardous nature of the project or the work, it may be necessary to make them maintain an umbrella policy that sits above these things. Okay? Because that $2 million that you were counting on as a district in the event something went wrong may not be there. You know this piece of paper says it does. What it doesn't show is that that limit may be halfway eroded, all the way eroded, whatever. One other thing, again, this is, I don't have time to cover everything, but one other thing that I think is very important, as I mentioned earlier, about 2/3 of the way down the right-hand side of the document under workers' compensation and employers' liability, it has a little box that says WC statutory limits, and there's an X checked there. That is extremely important, and here's why. It's important that that X is in that box, and here's why. Texas is one of the only states, if not the only state in the country, where you have the right as an employer to not buy workers' compensation insurance for your employees. You can do what's called reject the act. And a lot of contractors, fast food restaurant chains, retail operations, they have found over the years that it makes more sense for them to not buy workers' compensation, but rather buy some type of occupational accident policy. And that puts the employer in a better position to challenge employee injuries. Well, there's two problems in the school district. Number one, the contractor has to provide statutory work comp limits to do school district work. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. Okay, and number two,
Is that statute?
yes, as required by statute. Number two, you don't want to have a contractor on your job site who doesn't have statutory workers' comp insurance. Okay, because then your tort immunity notwithstanding, there's a serious injury, basically the general contractor loses their common law defenses when it comes to defending that injury, and now the district is named in the suit. You got to spend legal dollars to ensure that, to defend yourself, even though you're going to prove your immunity, ultimately, hopefully, you still have to expend legal dollars on these. So not only is it statutorily required, it's just a smarter thing to do. You do not want an act rejecter working on your premises. Okay, about 2/3 of the way down on the left-hand column, there's the builder's risk. There's a column that says builder's risk. Okay, what is builder's risk? Well, fortunately for you, because I know you didn't have anything to do tonight, I'm going to pass out a 4 or 5 page handout on what builder's risk is. If you're not interested in this or doesn't apply to you, please share it with your neighbor. Tell them they have to read it. There will be a testimony. But builder's risk is a funny word, funny term. It makes it sound like it's some kind of liability insurance, but it's not. Builder's risk is really nothing more than property insurance for your assets while they're under construction. Okay? So if you have a building that's being built, obviously that building is exposed to fire, hurricane, earthquake, and all the other stuff. Good. This is what this covers. It's basically, it really should be named property insurance. Okay, because that's what it is. It's property insurance, but it does not cover the contractor's assets or property. It covers your property, your assets. So builder's risk insurance for a school construction project, particularly for a coastal school district, is hugely important. Because if there is a serious loss, a hurricane, a big vandalism situation 2/3 of the way through construction, this is the policy that's going to address that. Again, this little Accord 1-page certificate doesn't really tell us much about what we just bought as a district. We hired a contractor to put builder's risk insurance in place Well, if it's a $25 million middle school or elementary, or like Kleinville, a $200 million high school, if it's a big project, that builder's risk project is important. I mean, that builder's risk policy is important. Because so you want, at least on the bigger projects, you want to get a copy of that, and you want to have some insurance expert look at it, verify it, make sure that it doesn't exclude things like wind, flood, or that it doesn't have $1 million limit for flood or wind, you know, because your specs, most of the time, require all risk, builder's risk insurance, with no limitations. And unfortunately, for contractors on the coast, it's hard to buy all risk, builder's risk insurance. And so, you know, either they're gonna charge you a whole lot of money to do it, or they're just not gonna buy it. You need to get a copy of it and verify that it's been purchased and it's in place. The last thing you wanna do is have a big loss at the construction site, and now we're finding out builder's risk policy, the property insurance policy is what it is basically, isn't sufficient.
Joe, we're at 125.
That doesn't include the food court. All right. Anyone, questions so far, Karen?
Yeah, I just have one question back to Thomas's question about the workers' comp exemption. Is that for construction contracts? Is that for any contract?
I've had attorneys tell me that it only applies, the statute only applies to construction contracts. Okay? So in other words, if you have some other form of vendor providing services, I still think your specs probably require your vendors to maintain statutory work comp insurance, but that is not required by statute. That may be required by your specs, but it's not, there's not a separate statute.
I was thinking more about service providers.
Apparently they're not considered mandated by that statute. So what you may be confronted with is that you've got a vendor that's responding to an RFP or a bid, and somehow it's identified that they don't have statutory workers' comp. They're actor-jackers. You know, they have a deal with their employees that, hey, get hurt, we're gonna pay for your medical bills, and we'll see what else happens. You know, then you have to decide, well, is that gonna work for us? Are we okay with that? So the other thing I passed out was a payment performance bond. You know, this is for larger construction projects. You know, all government construction in Texas has to be bonded for the most part, all government work. And so payment and performance bond is very, very important, because what it says is, number one, there's a third party that's going to step in if the prime contractor fails to pay their subs. Remember, if the subs don't get paid, they put a lien on your property. Okay, that's no good. And number two, if the general contractor for some reason has to default, and that has happened in Texas here recently, you know, it's tough being a contractor. Cash flow, you guys understand that better than anybody. So if the contractor can no longer perform, you've got a third party on the hook here who will step in and see that the job is completed. But you only have a third party on the hook here if this is a true and valid bond. So my suggestion to you is to go back to your district and say, and figure out how many bonds are we asking contractors for during the year? Is it 1? Is it 20? And once you figure that out, you know, if it's 1 every 3 years, then I don't know that you need to put in a separate policy in place to review bonds. But if you're doing a couple a year, even if you're doing 1 a year, it's important. Contact me and let's talk about how you verify a bond. It's a process by which you contact the state to verify that the surety, which is basically the insurance company backing the bond, is licensed and is in good financial standing. It's also a process by which you contact the issuing underwriter directly, You circumvent the contractor and their insurance agent, and you contact the surety directly. Say, hey, I just want to make sure that you issued this bond, you're okay with it, and the contractor's line of credit, so to speak, is sufficient to cover our particular project. Because the underwriter doesn't issue bonds. What happens is a contractor enters into, it's very similar to a banking relationship, a credit relationship. They enter into a relationship with a surety, which is an insurance company. And the contractor lays out all their financials to this surety. Open up their books, and they say, we've done this much work the last 3 years, these types of projects, and we expect to do this much work the next 3 years. Okay? And so the surety agrees or doesn't agree. Let's say they agree, okay, great, I will become your surety. Well, from that point forward, it's the insurance agent, not the insurance carrier, not the surety, who's going to issue these bonds. Well, sometimes things get lost in translation out of our omission or commission. An agent, a contractor says, I'm bidding on a job at Spring Branch, need a bond. Calls his agent, the agent sends them the bond, they send it on to the district. What happened was, it wasn't, that contractor had gone beyond their bonding line, okay? Or something had changed in the contractor's financials, and as far as the surety was concerned, they'd issued notice that, hey, we're not backing any more bonds. So it's important to get it from the horse's mouth, is my point, with bonds. And because it's so infrequent that you're actually looking at a bond, I think it's a process you should undertake. It doesn't take a lot of time. With insurance certificates, it'd be virtually impossible to contact every single insurance company and underwriter of the issuing certificates. There's just too many. But with a bond, it's important enough, it's efficient enough process, and it's infrequent enough. I think you've got to verify the bond.
So Joe, on the certificate of insurance, do you have to get them, you may have said this, do you have to get them on the subs as well?
No. Your agreement with your prime contractor is that those specs trail down to every subcontractor of all tiers. And it's the GC is contractually obligated to make sure that every sub they bring on site is also adhering to those requirements.
And also the builder's risk, is that a premium insurance or is that a self-funding program?
That is a premium. That is an insurance policy. Basically what happens is the contractor says, gets awarded a job. Say they get awarded a $25 million middle school. They then go to their insurance agent, say, I was just awarded a $25 million middle school, Friendswood, I need builder's risk insurance. So then that insurance agent goes and secures an insurance policy, a premium bearing policy. The contractor is going to pass that premium on to you. And again, I strongly encourage that in the construction bid process, you verify that premium and you get a copy of that builder's risk policy and cross-reference.
And what is that insurance for?
That's property insurance. Builder's risk insurance is property insurance. So it's insuring you for any physical damage that happens during construction. So a big renovation job, an existing building should have a builder's risk. But certainly any freestanding building you're building needs to have builder's risk.
Typically, it's part of general contractors, it's in their bid, but when I worked for Creek and y'all were doing the, education bills, we pull it out because we got better.
That's right.
It only saves a lot of money, Creek actually very good themselves.
More and more districts, particularly districts that are doing $50 million or more, are saying, University of Texas Medical, more and more governmental entities now just buy their own builder's risk insurance. Because here's one of the problems. Number one, if you're coastal, that contractor cannot buy sometimes all risk, low deductible builder's risk insurance. And if they did construct that, the cost passed back to you would be huge. But the bigger issue is there's a big percentage deductible in there for windstorm. Well, if I'm a contractor, and you're telling me that if a windstorm comes through this project, I'm on the hook for the cost entirely, well, I'm going to say, well, how am I going to budget? What if there's 2 hurricanes during the course of this thing? I'm going to have to budget this huge deductible. How am I going to pass that back to you? So what more and more coastal owners have found is, you know what, we're gonna do more than $50 million of construction. We're gonna buy our own builder's risk directly from the insurance company and just leave the contractor out of it. If there's a loss, we understand, we've got to deal directly with the insurance company to get the proceeds to fix the damage. So, you know, Creek is doing that, Pasadena's been doing it for a long time, Fort Bend, anything in the medical center. They all have what are called master builders risk insurance programs. How am I doing on time? This is everybody staying awake? 1 minute? You did that to the last guy.
No, you're
Good. Okay.
I have a question.
Yes.
Right there on the certificate holder, there's a little box on the top left side, if you're looking at it, top level.
Yes.
Sometimes we ask for either you're a vendor or you are the organization, you ask, can I be a named insurance on it?
Yes.
Two questions on that. One, does it cost more to put somebody else's name like ACD and another provider? And two, what is the significance of having that name there in the overall cost of the
Right. So, generally speaking, there can only be one named insured in that box up there. Okay? And that name needs to be the contractor or the vendor's name. Okay? What we want to be is an additional insured. Okay? And that's where, very, very important point you raised, because additional insured is what we all need to understand. If we're gonna hire somebody, we have to be an additional insured on their insurance. Okay, number one, it doesn't usually cost, there's no additional cost for it. Insurance companies understand if my client, they're going out and doing work for school districts and other third parties who are gonna ask them to be named as additional insured. So they're not gonna charge them for that. There's a thing called blanket additional insured, which basically the insurance company for the contractor or vendor agrees that anytime somebody asks you to be named additional insured, they don't charge you for it. Sometimes they'll charge a contractor for it, but it's not much. But you'll notice, so where on the certificate does it reflect that the certificate holder, which is us, is an additional insured? Well, there's two places. There's two columns in the middle of the page, little skinny columns. If you look up at the top of the first skinny column, it says ADL insured, that's additional insured. What should have happened here on this certificate is this agent should have put an X on each row in that column going down, right? They didn't. Instead, what they chose to do was down in the description of operations, about 2/3 of the way down the page, they state that the certificate holder, which is the district, you need to make sure it's the district, not some other contractor, is an additional insured. So either way, they either need to check the box or they need to state in this comment section that you, the certificate holder, are an additional insured. And number two, there's really no additional cost for that to happen. And one other thing that I think is important, sometimes a contractor will come to you and it's somebody you want to hire, and they'll say, look, we have a $1 million limit. You know, we don't want to do a $5 million limit or $2 million, whatever you're asking to do. And so then your procurement people or whoever it is, your facilities person comes to you and says, well, what do we do? 9 times out of 10, if you'll ask that contractor to go back to their insurance agent and say, quantify the cost for us of what it would cost you and ultimately cost us as a district to comply with our limits, to comply with our insurance requirements. 9 times out of 10, when they go through the exercise of going to quantify what that additional premium cost would be, it's nominal. It's not much. It's definitely worth the cost. Occasionally you'll have a really small mom and pop deal that your contract would double their annual revenue, and so yeah, that's going to be a big, relatively speaking, a big percentage increase in their premium. But typically, the cost to go from a $2 million limit to a $5 million limit, or the cost to go from a $1 million limit to a $2 million limit on this specific job, not for all the work they're doing, just on this specific job, is not a big deal, cost-wise. So don't be scared off, and let your procurement people know, don't be scared off and get some kickback initially from the vendor saying, well, your limit requirements are too high. Okay, any other thoughts about insurance, about construction insurance or risk management? Let me just real quickly hit on property insurance. As I said earlier, things have gotten a lot better, not necessarily for homeowners. Homeowners insurance in Harris County and coastal areas is still just not improving very much. But for commercial building owners and school districts, the market has definitely stabilized, and we're seeing some improvements there. So underwriters, fortunately, starting to kind of forget about Tropical Storm Allison and Ike and Rita and Katrina and all the rest of it. And we're starting to see some improved terms there. I want to talk real quickly about a policy that nobody really thinks much about because it's a real small premium and it's kind of lumped into your liability insurance package typically. It's crime or employee dishonesty insurance. Now, I'm sure you all have seen in the news, there's for some reason been some incidents. I'm passing out one now in case you didn't see it. And let's talk a little bit about this insurance policy and what it does and what it doesn't do. All right. I want to pick on Angleton, which was happened to see this in the news. There's other districts and entities that have had a situation where an employee or a third party associated with the district has somehow stolen money or securities from the district. And what's really unusual is that the scale of these claims, of these losses, have been in the 6 figures and sometimes 7 figures. Okay, which we're not accustomed to seeing, not in the school district business. How can that happen in the school district business? Internal auditors, external auditors, TEA. So it has come as a surprise, and it's come as a surprise to insurance underwriters, okay, who typically charge anywhere from $1,000 to maybe $9,000 premium for these policies. They're starting to go, whoa, wait a second. There's something inherently deficient in the school district world when it comes to internal controls and audits that's allowing these types of events from happening, or allowing these events to happen. You guys know the answer to that far better than I do, but I'll just make a couple of points. Number one, be prepared as this insurance renews to perhaps deal with a premium increase. And again, we're not talking about tens of thousands of dollars because the premium's already so small. But if it goes from $3,000 to $6,000 or $10,000 to $13,000, that's a 30% increase. Oh wow, why is that? This is why that is. And number two, be prepared to become a lot more, or disclose a lot more information about why this would never happen in your district. You know, what measures are in place to make sure this could never happen in your district. What does this policy cover? Well, typically it covers employee dishonesty, theft. More and more it's covering computer theft by outside parties. You know, the hacking and the credit card theft, information theft is becoming more and more common. It covers just burglary. It also covers mysterious disappearance. So if you come in one Monday morning and the Booster Club money that they spent all semester raising is gone, you need to talk to your crime insurance provider. There's a good chance that's covered, and typically subject to a very low deductible. So just be aware that the coverage is there, and there's a little bit of pain in that market right now. How much time do I have for real? I could go on all day, but I don't know want to do that. What time's it right now? After 1? All right. Well, that's pretty much the highlights. If there are any other questions about other insurance policies you have, we can talk about that. Any other questions about insurance? Anyone, risk management stuff? All right. My name is Joe Blasi again. If you have any questions, my number is 713-213-9934. I'm happy to help. Thank you.